Chapter 1042. Lisa glared at him and said, "Yes, it's the life I chose. But if you hadn't appeared in my life, it wouldn't have been ruined like this. It's okay that my husband is gone, but my two children are still so young. How are you going to return their lives to me? You clearly know that you shouldn't have given birth to children if you're wandering on the edge of darkness. It's your own choice to let the two children wander around with you. The law is merciless. You know what you've done. 11 base is just a sharp sword in front of the military and the police. Without me and 11 base, there will be others responsible for killing you. As for the two children, our people shouldn't have touched them. You should find out how they died." Lisa held his clothes tightly. They died under the bombers of war-torn countries. They were badly mutilated, and their eyes were open when they died. If we weren't chased by 11 base, if we weren't cornered, we wouldn't have fled to such a dangerous country. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. He grabbed the gun in her hand and put it against her forehead, staring at her coldly. When you were still young in High City, you had already assassinated many young and beautiful girls in the nightclub. Do you think I don't know that you are a vicious woman? Don't pretend to be affectionate in front of me. If you really love your two children and husband, you wouldn't be so close to the drug trafficking gang after knowing that everything has been destroyed." Lisa looked at him with red eyes. Because of his words, the tears in her eyes almost dried up in an instant. She sneered and reached out to grab the gun, but Li Nanheng just raised his hand easily. When the Asian man who broke in from the balcony pounced at him, he turned around and shot the gun in his hand. The gun fell to the ground in an instant, and the Asian man quickly rolled back, knelt on one knee on the ground, picked up the gun, and rushed over again. The woman named Raisha in front of him had been in the underworld for more than 10 years. She left High City with others at the age of 17, and was now 32 years old. Her skills in all aspects were definitely not inferior to any female soldier who had been trained for many years. She also reacted very quickly. Although she didn't have a gun in her hand, there was a dagger in her sleeve that flashed with cold light and directly attacked him. Li Nanheng blocked Lisa's dagger with one hand, and at the moment the Asian man rushed over, he raised the gun and pointed it at his forehead. When the Asian man was about to avoid the muzzle of his gun, he raised his foot and kicked the lantern next to him up and smashed it at the Asian man's face. However, even if Reisa's hands were restrained, she still exerted the strength of a woman to pester him. She simply held his arm with one hand and struggled with the other hand. At the same time, she lowered her head to bite him. Because of her pestering, Li Nanheng suddenly felt a sharp pain from the wound on his back. He frowned, looked coldly at the crazy woman beside him, and twisted her wrist hard. When the dagger in her hand suddenly fell to the ground, he caught it with the back of his foot and kicked the Asian man, who had just struggled to get up from under the lantern stand. The tip of the dagger directly pierced into the Asian man's calf, and blood instantly flowed to the ground. He is not as fast as a gun. Seeing that his arms and body moved so fast that she couldn't trap him at all, Lisa simply entangled him with her hands and feet. At the same time, she found that he seemed to be injured, so she shouted, "He has a wound on his back." Hearing such a news, the Asian man endured the pain in his calf, leaned down, pulled out the dagger, stood 2 meters away from Li Nanheng and Lisa, and accurately pointed the muzzle at Li Nanheng's head. He clearly knew that he couldn't be too close to Li Nanheng. In a close fight, he couldn't beat him at all. Now that Lisa was entangled with him, he could definitely blow up his head with a single shot from his current position. Li Nanheng's face was cold and gloomy. Because of the pain on his back, he couldn't successfully push Lisa away from him. Although it was only a man and a woman, these two people obviously knew his moves very well. Now they also knew that he was injured on his back, so he couldn't get rid of Lisa's arm. Now it was very likely that he couldn't avoid the gun because of Lisa's entanglement. Just when Li Nanheng suddenly raised his leg, bent his knee to hit Lisa's abdomen hard, pushed Lisa away a little, and was about to take out the silencer hidden in his trouser pocket, the Asian man 2 meters away had already pulled the trigger. At this critical moment, a bottle of shower gel suddenly flew over from the direction of the bedroom door and hit the Asian man's hand hard. The Asian man's shot was abruptly missed because of the bottle of shower gel. The bullet hit the wall to one side, making a loud noise and giving off the smell of gunpowder as the bullet rubbed against the wall. Li Nanheng abruptly turned his eyes to look at Feng Ling, who suddenly appeared in the direction of the bedroom. At the same time, he saw a corner of the curtain fluttering because the window was opened. He immediately understood how she came in, but at the same time, he looked to the side and gave her an instruction with the special sight signal of 11 base that only Feng Ling could understand. Feng Ling didn't speak, but coldly looked away from him. There was nothing else in his room. She still had a bottle of shampoo in her hand, which was heavy enough for her to use for a while. Only when she approached the Asian man and grabbed the weapon in his hand could she have more chances. The look Li Nanheng gave her was telling her that he had a gun. So the gun that had just fallen on the ground was about to become her weapon. Because of Feng Ling's sudden intrusion, Lisa and the Asian man looked at each other. Before they came, they didn't expect that Li Nanheng would have help, but this woman seemed to have some skills. They didn't know much about 11 base in the past 2 years. This time, they came here for Li Nanheng, and because they knew that Li Nanheng always acted alone this time, they came here when the opportunity was right. So, who was this woman who suddenly appeared? How did she come here? Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1043. In just a few seconds, Feng Ling quietly observed the overall situation in the room. Thankfully, she had stayed here for a night before. Even if she did not observe carefully, she knew what was placed in every position. The lampstand by Li Nanheng's side had fallen to the ground. On her side, under the coffee table, the man and woman couldn't see because of the sofa. There was an empty fruit plate under the coffee table, and there were 2 fruit knives in the fruit plate. When the Asian man who had just injured his hand suddenly raised his gun and was about to shoot Li Nanheng, she did not rush to throw the thing in her hand. Instead, she suddenly moved forward in an unexpected posture. The Asian man was sure that this short-haired young woman, who suddenly broke and was good at martial arts. Because of her movement, his fingers paused. At this moment, Feng Ling found an opportunity to lean down and pick up the fruit knife under the coffee table. She separated her hands and thrust forward. Although the fruit knife was not sharp enough, the tip was at least sharp. Because of the force she thrust forward, the tip of the knife stabbed into the back of the Asian man's hand. Ah! The Asian man groaned in pain and almost lost his grip on the gun. He quickly changed his hand and shot forward. But this time, Li Nanheng had already dodged, and at the same time, another fruit knife thrown by Feng Ling had stabbed Raisha's arm. Raisha's arm stiffened in pain, and Li Nanheng took this opportunity to slap her away. At the same time, he took out the gun in his trouser pocket and fired 3 shots at the Asian man. 1 shot hit the man's leg, 1 shot in the arm, and 1 shot in the shoulder. He aimed at him, but did not directly hit his vital parts. These 2 people had important clues about the drug gangs that escaped, so he could only capture them alive. Otherwise, he would definitely shoot his head first. Raisa was pushed aside by the force of Li Nanheng's hand and stumbled to the ground. She lowered her head and saw the gun on the ground. She was about to reach out to pick it up, but someone picked it up 1 step ahead of her. Raisha suddenly raised her eyes and met Feng Ling's eyes. However, before she could see the emotions in Feng Ling's eyes at such a close distance, she was kicked to the ground by Feng Ling, and at the same time, her shoulder was hit hard by Feng Ling. Raisha groaned in pain and cursed. She had never seen a woman who was better at martial arts than her. The point was that this woman looked very petite and not big at all. The moment Feng Ling picked up the gun, she wounded Raisha, put the gun against her head, and looked down at her coldly. Don't move. Raisha sat stiffly on the ground and did not dare to move, but gripped the carpet on the ground tightly and glared at her fiercely. Who are you? It had been a long time since Feng Ling participated in such a battle with guns or violence. Hearing the other party's question, she was about to say her name in 11 base out of reflex, but when she was about to speak, she paused and didn't answer. She just looked at Ruisha coldly and said indifferently, "Don't worry about who I am. If you dare to move again, You will be killed by my gun. I'm afraid you can only ask the king of hell about my name. Li Nanheng also thought that Feng Ling would say her name in 11 base, but she didn't. He also noticed that she paused for a few seconds. When the Asian man fell to the ground and twitched because he was shot, he turned his eyes to Feng Ling, who was pressing Raisha to the ground. Feeling the man's gaze, Feng Ling also turned her eyes to him at the same time. Without waiting for him to ask, she said directly, I met them downstairs just now. I found they were suspicious and came directly to the 15th floor. So I guess they might come to seek revenge on you or some terrorists. I was worried that something would happen, so I climbed up from the fire escape on the 14th floor to have a look. Li Nanheng put the gun back into his pocket, and then looked at the Asian man lying on the ground, who was not dead, but had lost the ability to fight back. To avoid any mistakes, he went up and searched all over his body. After finding no extra guns or weapons, he straightened up, casually shook his stiff shoulders and back, and then looked at her, saying, You care about me? Feng Ling didn't answer, but looked at the woman in front of her with red eyes. What should we do with this woman? Li Nanheng lowered his eyes, and happened to see that Raisha was about to pick up the carpet beside her hand. When he was about to speak, Feng Ling had already kicked her in the waist. Before Raisha could lift the carpet, she suddenly lay on the ground awkwardly, and her hands were instantly removed from the corner of the carpet. Feng Ling stepped on the carpet and looked down at the woman on the ground. Should we call the police or the military? She was asking Li Nanheng. Li Nanheng glanced at the two people on the ground, thought of something, and suddenly turned to look out of the window. Not far from this window, about 300 or 400 meters away, there was a 38-story financial building. Looking at the reflective glass on the top floor of the building, he raised his eyebrows and suddenly said, Be careful. There are sniper rifles. They came prepared. There are more than 2 people. Hearing this, the Asian man lying on the ground covered in blood suddenly grinned coldly and struggled to get up from the ground. But he couldn't. But the fierceness and confidence in his eyes showed that Li Nanheng guessed right. Raisha fell to the ground, sneered and turned to look coldly at Li Nanheng. You're right, Li Nanheng. You've been surrounded. It's not so easy to escape. I didn't expect that there would be a woman by your side who would risk her life for you. Why don't you let her die with you? Feng Ling looked at him and didn't speak. Suddenly, she felt a tight grip on her arm. She turned around with a jerk, only to see Li Nanheng suddenly came over and pulled her away. At the same time, he turned his back to the window, shielded her in his arms and pushed her out. Go. Feng Ling turned back and was about to speak when she suddenly heard the sound of explosions coming from the 3 windows, facing the financial building on the opposite side of the bedroom balcony and kitchen at the same time. This meant that there was more than 1 sniper on the other side, but in all directions. Li Nanheng, don't talk nonsense. Go first. Li Nanheng pushed her forward without hesitation, his back still blocking all possible directions behind her, and warned her with his eyes to leave immediately. Please remember this book's domain name. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1044. At this time, if she turned her back to the window she would die. Feng Ling staggered back to look at him, but was still pushed close to the door by the man. She looked back at the window and turned back to pull him. Li Nanheng. Let's go first. Li Nanheng seized every minute and second to ask her to go first without hesitation. Go! Almost at that moment Feng Ling, who was too familiar with sniper rifles, suddenly felt her eyelids twitching. Even though she was far away, she looked out of the window and shouted, Be careful! At the moment when the sniper bullet broke through the window, Li Nanheng grabbed Feng Ling's arm and bent down with her to avoid the bullet. The bullet hit the wall again, making a loud noise, and then another shot. Seeing that Feng Ling hadn't been able to get out of the room, Li Nanheng frowned. He was worried that if Raisha and her companions were tied with small explosives, Feng Ling would be killed if she continued to stay here. However, there was no time to say or think too much. The man dragged Feng Ling to hide behind the sofa and pressed her head into his arms. The bullets outside the window came in one after another. The sound was loud, and the entire room was filled with the smell of gunpowder, completely breaking the peace of this neighborhood. Feng Ling raised her head from his arms. Li Nanheng turned back to look out of the window, then lowered his head to look at her, and said in a low voice, "Their target is me. Don't get involved. Run if you can." "If I run away, what about you?" Feng Ling's hand also held his sleeve tightly. "Since you can run away, let's go out together. I'll go out with you. How many innocent people are there outside? Don't forget the mission of 11 base. We are not crazy enough to sacrifice other innocent people to satisfy our personal heroism. We have the military and the police behind us." With that, he suddenly pulled her out of his arms. "Go." Feng Ling's hand was still holding onto his sleeve. "Let's go together?" Li Nanheng knew the stubbornness in her bones. He lowered his eyes to look at her. When the sofa behind him was filled with smoke from the bullets, he stared into her eyes and suddenly chuckled. "I won't die. Even if you want to care about me and live and die with me, you have to wait for another time. I'm afraid I can't be touched now." Feng Ling. Who would want to be touched by this shameless person? She tugged at his sleeve. "Come with me." He couldn't dawdle any longer. Otherwise, the sofa, the only barrier in the hall, would be completely destroyed. Li Nanheng became serious again and was about to get up, when suddenly Wuxia, who had been lying on the ground powerlessly, slowly moved her hand toward her calf. Bullets kept coming in from the 3 windows behind them. Even though Li Nanheng saw it, he couldn't do anything. When he pulled Feng Ling up and ran to the door, he suddenly held Feng Ling firmly in his arms and carried her out. The 2 of them walked very fast and tried to avoid the bullets behind them. However, when they were about to step out of the door, Wuxia had successfully taken out the mini silencer hidden in the decorative pocket on her calf, stared at Li Nanheng and Feng Ling, and quickly fired a shot. The sound of the sniper rifle was so loud that Feng Ling couldn't hear the unique muffled sound of the silencer gun. She only felt that Li Nanheng suddenly turned sideways with her in his arms, and the man who was holding her suddenly stiffened. However, when she suddenly raised her eyes to look at him, she could only see the man's cold chin but not his pale face. Then she was suddenly carried out by the man. Finally rushing out of the door, Li Nanheng took her to hide behind the wall. The man panted heavily and said, "There should be people lurking in the safe passage and the elevator. Go down alone. They don't know you and won't attack you even if they meet in the elevator." At this time, Feng Ling turned to push open the door on the side of the safe passage and went in to take a look. After checking, she turned back and was about to call him, only to see that the man's back was smeared with blood on the wall. She immediately raised her eyebrows. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. It's just a minor injury." Li Nanheng panted again and couldn't hide the paleness on his face. He didn't even frown and smiled at her. "Be good and go." A certain action of Wuxia just now came to Feng Ling's mind. At that time, in order to avoid the bullets of the sniper rifle outside the window, they ignored that although the gun in the Asian man's hand had fallen to the ground, the woman named Wuxia hadn't taken out her gun. If one person carried a gun, the other person would definitely carry a gun. But she didn't take it out at that time, so they ignored the person closest to her. She didn't hear any sound and didn't find that Wuxia had a gun, so it seemed that only a special mini silencer could do it. Feng Ling didn't say more and went forward to hold the man's arm. "Go." Li Nanheng looked at her. "I told you to go by yourself. Don't you understand?" Feng Ling looked at him coldly. "Bossly, if I were you and you were me, would you go?" "Why not? Don't you hate me and disgust me?" Li Nanheng chuckled. When he laughed, the man's eyebrows trembled slightly because of the pain in his back yesterday and the new injury, but he still held back and didn't make a sound. Looking at his pale face when he laughed, Feng Ling didn't speak with a cold face. She didn't refute or admit it, but dragged his arm hard, pushed open the door of the escalator again, and dragged him in. Li Nanheng staggered a little. After being dragged in by her, he looked around the escalator. The surroundings looked calm, but based on their experience, they were probably surrounded by people. It was not safe in the elevator, and they might be attacked from both sides here. At this time, Feng Ling took out the gun from his body, held it in her hand, and then held him down with one hand. "Go." Even if Li Nanheng had new injuries on top of old ones, he wouldn't lose to her strength, but Feng Ling insisted on holding his hand. If the two of them continued to delay, neither of them would be able to escape safely. The man who was being held by her side. Slow down. Don't fall. At this moment, Feng Ling looked back at him. Are you going or not? Li Nanheng looked at her with a pale face and lips. Seeing the anger and impatience in her eyes, he sighed with a smile. All right, I'll go. Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version website M. Chapter 1045. Feng Ling glared at him again and helped him down. Whether it was the cooperation after long-term training and missions in 11 Base, or the instinctive tacit understanding between the two of them now, when she saw the people lying in ambush in the corridor, Feng Ling raised the gun and hit their heads with the butt of the gun. Fortunately, although they were ambushed, they were scattered in all directions because they didn't know that Li Nanheng would suddenly have such a skilled helper like Feng Ling by his side. There were not many people lying in ambush. As long as they dealt with it well, they could be solved in a few seconds. Along the way, the two of them did not waste a single bullet and went straight out of the apartment building. When they came out, they saw that many people who lived there thought that it was a terrorist attack because of the commotion and the terrifying bullets. Many people had already escaped. There were many people coming and going in the parking lot. Everyone was running like crazy. Some carried their children or the elderly into their cars and then drove away in all directions. Such a scene was very common in the United States. Once something similar to a terrorist attack happened, the people here would immediately flee the scene to avoid being implicated as cannon fodder. It was precisely because there were so many people outside that Feng Ling could take advantage of the chaos to rush into the parking lot and find Li Nanheng's car. Because he was wearing black clothes and had a wound on his back, no one would notice it. She ran all the way to the car, searched the man's body for a long time, and finally found the electronic car key. She quickly opened the door and helped him into the passenger seat. He was helped out by this little woman. Li Nanheng glanced at the driver's seat and was about to go over when Feng Ling pressed him against the seat and buckled the seat belt in front of him. Don't move. I'll drive. Li Nanheng glanced at her. Do you want to die? Of course, she understood that if those people were lying in ambush outside and were determined to target her, the first thing they would do would be to kill the person sitting in the driver's seat, no matter who that person was. Feng Ling did not speak. After fastening his seatbelt, she quickly moved over and sat in the driver's seat. Under Li Nanheng's gaze, she started the engine without changing her expression, drove the car out quickly, and rushed out of the ambushers. There were too many people and cars around, so she could temporarily use it as a cover. After rushing out of the community, because she was used to her duties and missions in 11 Base, she habitually did not drive the car onto the main road. Instead, she took a shortcut and turned into a less populated road. She drove towards the suburbs and uninhabited highways, so as not to implicate the innocent people living in the normal living area. Li Nanheng sat there without moving. He just looked at the gloomy sky outside and said, "Be careful of a pincer attack from the front and back." Feng Ling did not speak, but she was already mentally prepared. From time to time, she observed the road conditions and situation behind from the rearview mirror. After the car drove out for about a kilometer, there was already a car chasing up. Who are these people? Feng Ling asked coldly. A group of drug gangs that were encircled and suppressed not long ago. The forces behind them are very powerful. Li Nanheng said in a low voice, and was about to raise his hand to take something. But because of the gunshot wound on his back, and the old wound caused by the stick yesterday, he frowned and put his hand down without saying a word. Feng Ling noticed his movement. What do you want to take? Cell phone. She controlled the steering wheel with one hand, and reached out to search his body with the other. She found the cell phone and handed it to him. Li Nanheng glanced at the thing she handed to him, took it, opened it, and quickly sent his tracking signal authority to the base hall. Then he glanced at the car that was chasing closely behind him. He closed his eyes in annoyance because he had involved Feng Ling in the end, leaned against the seat, and let out a long breath. Feng Ling focused on starting, stepped hard on the accelerator, and glanced at him out of the corner of her eye. Speak. Li Nanheng closed his eyes and said, I really haven't married another woman. Feng Ling was silent for a moment. There's no need to talk about this. If something is really going to happen here today, if you can leave safely, at least think of me. Don't let me die with regret, right? It's a matter of principle. I can't tell you about the 3-year agreement for the time being, but you have to believe me. I'm sincere to you, and have never meant to play with your feelings. Because the man was seriously injured, and the gunshot wound on his back was not as simple as a superficial wound. His voice was a little hoarse. After bleeding for so long, he probably had no strength left. Feng Ling clenched the steering wheel. 3 years? What 3-year agreement? Back then, she didn't intend to ask, nor did she want to ask. Besides, when 11 Base was kicked out, she left and never thought of asking what had happened. She had always thought that it was just like what Han Jin said. It was just an unfruitful relationship. No one needed to care about it. But Miss Wen said that Li Nanheng refused to return to the Li family for her, and refused to meet the elders of the Li family. He had been looking for her for 2 whole years. She looked ahead and continued to drive, her voice a little hoarse. What do you want to explain? Wait until we are out of danger. Don't talk about dying. You can even survive a terrorist bomb zone. How can you be killed by such a small character? I don't remember Boss Li being such a negative person. Li Nanheng smiled. Have you forgotten that in 11 Base, just like in the military, every time there is something or before a mission, we have to write our last words first. Right now, I only have you by my side, so I can only leave my last words to you. Feng Ling was silent for a moment. What last words? Li Nanheng leaned weakly on the co-pilot's seat and glanced at the cars behind him that he couldn't shake off. After more than 10 seconds, he said hoarsely and quietly, I only have you, and you are the only woman I have ever liked. Don't you have anything else to say? Feng Ling's hand on the steering wheel tightened. No, my life is very simple. Except for the Li family, the base, there is only you, the man said with a soft sigh. Then he suddenly sighed with a smile, and turned to look out of the car window. Feng Ling drove very fast. This Hummer could be driven at its limit. In a short time, they had driven very close to the suburbs. Outside the car window was an endless plain and American farm. Because it was winter, the plain was full of yellow autumn colors. It was lonely and quiet, and there was no end in sight. Only the car kept driving forward. Please remember the original domain name of this book. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1046. Feng Ling didn't speak all the way, just observing everything in the rearview mirror, and suddenly said, There are inhabited areas ahead. We can't drive over. I know there is a jungle near the east of Boston. It's about 50 kilometers from here. These people are chasing us closely, and have made full preparations. Do you mind if I drive the car into the jungle? The jungle was an extremely dangerous area for others, but it was very simple for Feng Ling. If she wanted to deal with these people who had been chasing them, it might be the only best way out for the time being. But Li Nanheng's injuries couldn't be delayed. He didn't speak, just looked out of the window and responded, Okay. When Feng Ling came to a fork in the road ahead, she turned the car to the northeast and stepped on the accelerator all the way. The cars chasing after them were also very good and fast. No matter how fast they were, they couldn't get rid of them. Now they could only see if they could get rid of them in the jungle, and if they could counterattack. Looking into the distance, even though she couldn't see the jungle here, Feng Ling's eyes seemed to be shining as she looked straight ahead. After about 20 minutes, Feng Ling continued to observe the cars behind. Suddenly she turned to look at Li Nanheng, who had been silent for a long time, and suddenly looked down at the co-pilot's seat under him, only to see that the light brown leather seat had been dyed red by the blood flowing out of his back, and a lot of blood had flowed down the seat. Feng Ling frowned and suddenly turned the car around, causing the car to shake violently. Li Nanheng, who had almost fallen into a coma, suddenly opened his eyes because of such a change. Even though his eyes were filled with endless exhaustion and haggard from excessive blood loss, he was still very vigilant at the moment he opened his eyes. When he looked out of the window, at this moment, someone suddenly leaned out of the window and raised a gun to shoot at their car. The glass of this Hummer was bulletproof, which was very effective against this kind of bullet. Because they knew this, every bullet was aimed in the direction of the tire. Knowing their plan, Feng Ling kept changing the direction of the car, avoided every bullet and said, "Boss, don't sleep." Li Nanheng's face was pale. He just looked at the situation in the rearview mirror, breathed silently, and then slowly raised his hand, put a cold hand on Feng Ling's leg, took out the gun in her pocket, and said hoarsely, "Keep driving." Feng Ling looked at him, only to see that Li Nanheng seemed to have gathered some strength from somewhere. He held the gun in his hand and opened the window on the other side. Facing the strong wind outside the car, he raised the gun and shot backward. Feng Ling knew how accurate Li Nanheng's marksmanship was. Even if the speed of the car was fast and the wind was strong, even if they were forced to walk in front, even if he was seriously injured, as long as he fired a shot, he would definitely hit their tires. But he couldn't use his arms and wrists at all. She couldn't care too much now. She drove forward crazily, and at the same time, she heard the sound of Li Nanheng shooting. She immediately raised her eyes and looked at the rearview mirror. She couldn't see the direction of the bullet, but in less than 2 seconds, she suddenly saw that the car chasing in front suddenly tilted down and had a perfect tire burst. The corners of Feng Ling's mouth lifted, as expected of Li Nanheng. Then another shot, and the tires of another car were burst at the same time. After several consecutive shots, after the tires of those cars were burst, Li Nanheng pulled the trigger again, and then suddenly retracted his body out of the window. Feng Ling quickly pressed the central lock and helped him close the window. Li Nanheng didn't have much strength. He leaned against the seat and threw the gun back into her arms. "There are no bullets. Let's act according to the situation in the jungle." Although those cars had burst tires, they could still continue to chase, but their speed would be affected by the impact of the tires. Feng Ling took this opportunity to rush in the direction where she could vaguely see a dark green. Seeing that the car behind had been far away, Feng Ling finally had the mood to ask, "Just now before I got on the car, I saw a little injury on the car door yesterday. You didn't have time to send it back to Los Angeles to be repaired. Yesterday when you were driving at such a high speed, you directly parked the car in the middle of the road. Weren't you afraid of being the first to die?" Li Nanheng sat there with little energy, because of the injury on his back. His back was already covered with blood. He closed his eyes and smiled. "What have I been afraid of?" Such a rhetorical question caused the man's former arrogance to surface once again. Feng Ling didn't reply, but the man continued on his own. "Perhaps what I'm really afraid of is when I rushed back to the base 2 years ago and saw your empty room and the wine bottles on the ground. Perhaps what I'm really afraid of is that day when you were drugged and taken away in that car. If I didn't think of a way to stop you, who knows what they would have done to you. What really scared me was that when I was chased and surrounded by these people, you would be implicated because of me." Li Nanheng said as he closed his eyes and frowned slightly. "So, Feng Ling, whether you hate me or not, since you've already left 11 base, you should learn to cherish your life. Your life is no longer sold to the military or the police. You don't need to be responsible for anyone. You are only yourself." Feng Ling did not answer. At this moment, she suddenly looked up at the window. Li Nanheng also seemed to have heard something. He opened his eyes, slowly raised his pale face, and looked in that direction. But from the color and model, it was clearly not 11 Base's helicopter. "Is it an enemy or a friend?" Feng Ling asked. Li Nanheng didn't hesitate. "Enemy." Hearing this word, Feng Ling retracted her gaze and stared at the jungle ahead. "As far as I know, there are many pits of different sizes in the jungles near the city. They are all hidden under the grass, and the car will be destroyed if it is driven into them. I will directly crash the car into the nearest tree stump. Before we hit it, we must jump out of the car. Otherwise, no matter how good the performance of your car is, at this speed, the two of us will also die." Li Nanheng didn't speak, but as soon as she finished speaking, he directly unfastened his seat belt. His pale face was expressionless as he looked in the direction of the jungle, saying indifferently, "In a place like the jungle, you are the boss. I will listen to you. It wasn't like he didn't have field camp and jungle training. Did he need to coax her all the time? Feng Ling immediately squinted at him, but the car was about to hit her. She quickly let go of the steering wheel and unfastened her seatbelt. A second before the car crashed forward, the doors on both sides were suddenly pushed open, and the two quickly jumped out. Please remember the domain name of this book. For a mobile version website, M. Chapter 1047. The tall black car suddenly sped into the jungle at a speed of more than 250 miles per hour, fiercely crashing into the adjacent boulders and trees at the edge of the jungle. In an instant, a loud noise and an almost explosive sound erupted. After Feng Ling jumped out of the car, she felt pain in her limbs even though she was not injured. She quickly climbed up, looked back at the car that had begun to emit smoke, staggered around the car, and walked to the other side. Seeing that Li Nanheng had also stood up, she hurriedly walked over and held his arm. I'm fine, you don't need to help me, Li Nanheng said hoarsely. He was about to pull his hand out of hers when Feng Ling held his arm firmly. At the same time, she glanced into the depths of the jungle. There are cars behind them and helicopters in front. Let's go in first. Li Nanheng closed his eyes. It was clear that the injuries on his body and the violent impact when he jumped out of the car had a great impact on him. He did not say anything but only nodded. He was still about to withdraw his hand from her hand, but Feng Ling could see that he was seriously injured and held his arm tightly. Don't move. Let's go in first. Li Nanheng glanced at her. Before he could speak, he was supported by Feng Ling into the bushes that stretched as far as the eye could see. Inside there were indeed man-made pits under the bushes. The pits were already covered with tall bushes of different heights, so it was not easy to find the location of the giant pit, and there was no way to avoid it. It was very easy to fall into the pit if one was not careful. Both of them had received professional wilderness survival training, and 11 Base had organized mini survival training in the tropical rainforest. Men had a natural desire to conquer the wild and the jungle, and their sense of direction was also naturally keen. Feng Ling had lived in the jungle since she was a child, so this kind of dangerous place for many people was as easy as walking on flat ground for the two of them. It would be better if Li Nanheng wasn't injured because of her. Unfortunately, his injuries were not light. He even bled all the way. The man relied on his own strength to walk for about a few hundred meters. With Feng Ling's support, he gradually fell to her side uncontrollably. Feng Ling supported him with force. Hold on. Let's find a place where they won't easily find us. The helicopter will keep patrolling above. At least before our people arrive, we can't be blocked by them. Right now, the two of us don't have any advantage at all. We have to find a safe place first. Li Nanheng closed his eyes and nodded. He didn't want to lean on her, but Feng Ling held his waist tightly and held him with all her strength. Let's go. With pale lips, Li Nanheng lowered his eyes to look at the little woman, who was trying her best to help him walk in. He slowly raised his arm that had been hanging by his side, and finally allowed himself to put his hand on her shoulder, allowing her to support him all the way in. Right now, they didn't know how many people had come to surround them. They had come prepared. No matter how powerful the two of them were, facing such a pincer attack, and Li Nanheng was already injured, it was impossible for them to act rashly. Feng Ling supported him under various hidden bushes. After walking for another few hundred meters, the man's body suddenly fell down. Feng Ling turned her eyes abruptly, only to see that Li Nanheng's face was unbelievably pale. But the man didn't say anything. She quickly supported Li Nanheng to lean against a tree by the side, and then retracted her hand from his waist. She lowered her head to see that her sleeves and palms had been dyed red by the blood on his back. He had been bleeding for so long. If a doctor came in time to help stop the bleeding and remove the bullet, it would be better, but in this situation, how could she find a doctor? Can you still hold on? Feng Ling looked at him worriedly, and lowered her head to check the wound on his back. She was about to pull his clothes off, but as soon as her hand touched his collar, the man pressed it down. I'm fine, Li Nanheng said indifferently. It's just a small injury. You said it's a small injury when you were hit with a steel rod. Now that the bullet is in your flesh, You still say it's a small injury? Feng Ling waved his hand away and tugged his collar open. She lowered her head to see the bullet wound on his shoulder. It was a red mark about 3 centimeters in size, but this place was already badly mutilated, and his back was covered with blood. Li Nanheng originally wanted to push her away, but this woman was so strong that he couldn't even push her hand away. He was pressed down and his clothes were pulled open. Feeling the woman's gaze on his back, Li Nanheng couldn't push her away, so he could only look at the ground and sigh with a smile. What are you laughing at? Feng Ling closed his clothes and turned to look at the top of the jungle. The leaves here were dense and could block the helicopter's patrol. Those who drove over wouldn't find this place so quickly. She retracted her gaze and looked at the man. Is it funny to be injured like this? Li Nanheng smiled and said hoarsely, I'm in a good mood. Can't I laugh? Feng Ling put on a straight face. Are you crazy? You're still happy when you're injured like this? Li Nanheng still smiled and then looked around. Let's go. Let's continue. I'm a man. I'm not so delicate. I can still hold on. You're a man, not an immortal. The bullet is in your flesh. Do you think you're made of iron? Feng Ling complained coldly as she helped him up again. As she walked in, she paid attention to the man's expression from time to time. She had already tried her best to hold him and let him lean his weight on her. But the man clearly wanted to save face. Even in this state, he still insisted on walking on his own. At most, after walking dozens of steps, he couldn't take it anymore and leaned on her to rest for a few seconds before continuing forward. Feng Ling couldn't take it anymore. She suddenly pulled him and walked toward him, turning her back to him. I'll carry you. Although Li Nanheng's face was pale, he raised his brows because of her words and looked at the girl's slender back. Li Nanheng, you know that you've already implicated me. If you don't want me to waste time here with you and be dragged to death, hurry up and come up. I'll carry you. I can run for thousands of meters with a weight of 300 kilograms. You're not even half of it. I can still carry you. Come up. Li Nanheng curved his lips and leaned over to press against her back. However, he did not place his weight on her. Instead, he reached out and hugged her from behind, pulling her into his embrace. Chapter 1048. Feng Ling furrowed her brows and said sternly, I told you to come up. There's no need to carry me. Let me hold you. I can recover a lot of strength. The man spoke softly and huskily behind her back. Then, just as Feng Ling was about to fly into a rage, he took a step back and let her go. Feng Ling turned her head abruptly and looked at him in confusion. What time is it? You still? No matter when, I will always be your man. There is no reason for you to carry me on your back, unless I die and can't even breathe or control my own actions and thoughts. Otherwise, I will always be the one to protect you, and you will never be the one to carry me on your back. As the man spoke, he walked past her with a pale face and walked straight ahead. Even though he was gradually losing strength due to excessive blood loss, even though his steps were slow and he staggered, he still walked. Feng Ling looked at the man's black clothes. There was almost no blood stain, but the smell of blood in the air made her frown. She quickly walked up and raised her hand to support him. Then I'll support you, okay? The man's cold expression did not change. He turned to look at her. Feng Ling's expression was usually colder than his, but because of the wound on his back, she could not help it. Afraid that something would really happen to him, she carefully held his arm with both hands. Usually, there will be some places for wild animals to hide in the depths of the jungle. They are all very hidden small caves or tree holes under certain bushes. There are many of them. They may not be able to find us even if they want to. After saying that, she dragged the man to look around. Finally, she found a hidden place under an old tree that could accommodate 2 people. She hurriedly helped him to sit down. It was a hole under a big tree that should be impossible for the group of people to find. When Li Nanheng sat down, he frowned slightly because of the wound on his back, but it was only for a moment. He turned to look at the tall bushes outside. There are traces of blood all the way out. If they want to find us, they can borrow 2 hounds to find us. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Wait a moment. As Feng Ling spoke, She walked out of the small space that could only accommodate the two of them, and went into the tall bushes outside. Although this jungle was very large and looked dark and mysterious, it was actually the jungle closest to the city. The animals here had long run away because of the excessive disturbance of human beings. Only snakes and some harmless small animals could be found here. She plucked some chameleon grass from the jungle and crushed it into mud. Then, she rubbed the smelly chameleon grass mud all over the place along the path she came from. Then, she went to the other side and continued to rub the mud. In this way, after more than 10 minutes, Feng Ling quickly cleaned most of the areas. The smell of the grass was very strong. Not to mention that it was impossible for them to have a hound. Even if there was a hound, it was impossible for them to distinguish which was heavier, because the smell of the grass was mixed with the smell of blood, which could be easily confused with the smell of human. Only Feng Ling, who grew up in the jungle, could understand this. For others, unless they were professional jungle explorers, even authoritative doctors might not know this kind of thing. When she went back into the tree hole, she saw Li Nanheng sitting there, eyes closed, motionless. Feng Ling's heart skipped a beat. She quickly walked over and squatted down in front of him. Li Nanheng. The man with his eyes closed opened his eyes, because she suddenly pinched his shoulder hard. He looked at the girl in front of him. Although his face was pale and weak, his eyes seemed to still be bright. Didn't you just call me Boss Li? But it's good. Anything sounds better than Mr. Li. Feng Ling glared at him and didn't want to talk nonsense with him. She took out the dagger she had brought with her before getting into the car and cut open his clothes. When the man raised his brows and leaned against her, she said coldly, "I've already seen your wounds yesterday. I don't think you mind if I take another look today." "I don't mind, but your action of cutting open my clothes is too rough." The man chuckled hoarsely. Feng Ling said coldly, "If you like gentle people, go find gentle people. Don't bother me." For some reason, Li Nanheng smiled because of her words and even laughed out loud. At the same time, he couldn't help coughing because of the wound on his body. And the wound on his back that hadn't dried up continued to bleed. Just now, because he hadn't stopped moving, the wound couldn't heal easily. Until now, he hadn't passed out because of his good physique. Feng Ling looked at the man's pale but still smiling face, and suddenly remembered that night on Rogers Pass. At that time, he was so weak that she didn't want to get out of bed for several days. She hid in the tent next door, and didn't want to go out to see anyone. She was really blessed by this man's physical strength, so her physical strength was really nothing compared to his. For some reason, she suddenly thought of that matter. Feng Ling's expression darkened again, but she did not speak. She bent down and turned the man's shoulder. Then she leaned behind him and checked his wound. She then asked, "Did the bullet penetrate your shoulder blade?" "I don't think so. If the bone was pierced, I wouldn't have walked so far," the man replied hoarsely. "It's only in the flesh. Don't you have a knife? Help me take the bullet out." Feng Ling thought she had heard wrong. Her hand that was still around his wound suddenly paused, and she looked up with a jerk. "What did you say?" Li Nanheng looked back at her and picked up the dagger she had just thrown on the ground. "Take the bullet out." Feng Ling's hand left his back. "I don't know how to. We still don't know when we can leave. You should know very well that the longer the bullet stays in the body, the more dangerous it is. Do you want me to be dragged to death here?" the man asked calmly. "Can't you cut the flesh near the wound? The bullet is only in the surface of the flesh. It's not so difficult. You can take it out directly. I've never done it. I don't know how to do it," Feng Ling said as she looked at the wound on his shoulder thoughtfully. She remembered that when she was bitten by a snake, he made a cross-shaped scar on her shoulder with a knife. It seemed that if she drew a cross, she could indeed get the bullet out. Chapter 1049. Li Nanheng didn't look at the uncertain expression on her face, and threw the dagger into her arms. "Come." Feng Jie picked up the dagger and looked at the wound on his back. Then, she saw that the man had lowered his head slightly, completely exposing his smooth and perfect back to her. Her fingers that were holding the dagger froze. Feng Jie picked up the dagger and looked at the wound on his back. She held the dagger above the wound on his shoulder for a while and stared at the bullet wound. She steeled her heart, pressed his shoulder with one hand, and pressed the sharp knife against the wound with the other. Then bear with it. I'm not very good at it. If it really hurts you. The man didn't say anything, which was a silent reassurance to her. When she cut down with the tip of the knife, she could clearly feel that although the man did not make a sound, because her knife had not been sterilized and she had never treated anyone with it before, she might have poked a nerve behind his shoulder. She could feel the man's back muscles tensing as the tip of the knife went deeper and deeper into his body. She turned her head to look at him. She couldn't see the man's expression, but she could feel that the cross knife she made was definitely not as professional as the one he made on her shoulder. At that time, she did feel pain, but she was particularly relieved. How could Li Nanheng leave this matter to her? She had just cut open a cross blade, when the tip of the blade seemed to touch the bullet embedded in her flesh. She suddenly said, "I found the bullet." Yes. The tense muscles on the man's back seemed to have gotten used to the pain and gradually relaxed. His back was still facing her, and his voice was calm, as if he wasn't the one enduring the pain. "Do as you see fit." The bullet was not very deep. Feng Ling looked at the blood stain on the cross knife that was still bleeding, tested it with the tip of the knife, and then accurately picked out the bullet. The blood-stained bullet fell to the ground in an instant, emitting the crisp sound of metal hitting the ground. In just a few minutes, Feng Ling's forehead was covered in sweat. After confirming that the bullet had been taken out, she looked at the wound on his back, feeling distressed and helpless, and only said in a low voice, "It's done." The man in front of her did not move or speak. Feng Ling glanced at the wound on his back again, and then tentatively leaned forward to look at her, only to see that the man seemed to be focused on something. She was distracted by the matter of taking out the bullet, and abruptly withdrew her attention because of his silent and cold gaze. Then she vaguely heard at least 2 helicopters hovering above the jungle. From this distance, it could be heard that they were desperately searching for them. However, because the jungle was too dense, if they walked in normally, the chances of finding them would be higher. If they wanted to come in by car or helicopter, it would be equivalent to entering a blind spot. There was no room for them to do anything. Of course, even if someone really came in on foot at this time, without the sniper rifle in the distance and their hidden ambush, not to mention Feng Ling, even the seriously injured Li Nanheng could easily knock down 2 of them. Feng Ling bent down to pick up the blood-stained bullet on the ground, held it in her hand for a few seconds, and said, "It's a small silencer AK. Who is that woman? This gun is not cheap." "No background. It's just that she has a lot of men, and none of them are short of money. It's not difficult for her to get a top-quality gun." As Li Nanheng spoke, he raised his arm and was about to put on the clothes on his back, but Feng Ling reached out and pressed his hand. "Don't move. Although the bullet has been taken out, we still have to deal with the wound. If you put on the clothes again, do you want the clothes to stick to the wound after the blood dries?" As she spoke, she took out a small bag of wet wipes from her pocket, which she occasionally brought. There was only half a small bag left, but fortunately, it could wipe the blood. She didn't have a chance to disinfect the knife just now. After all, this place was not like the stone platform on the mountain wall of the Snake Valley. Now she started a fire to disinfect here, which was to inform the people outside of the hiding place. Everything was in a hurry, and now she didn't care whether the wet wipes had been disinfected or not. But she tried not to wipe his wound and the knife, only wiped the blood near the wound, and then wiped the blood on other parts of his back. Finally, she lifted up his torn clothes and simply put it on his back. "Put on the clothes first. I cut a little on the shoulder, so the blood shouldn't stick to the flesh." As she spoke, she cleaned up the blood on other parts of his body. When she was about to help the man lean against the side and pick up another clean wet wipe to wipe his face, she found that the man suddenly became very quiet. Seeing that the man's eyes had been closed, her hands on his arms and shoulders stiffened, and she leaned over to him. "Li Nanheng, don't be so quiet. Open your eyes and talk." Li Nanheng didn't respond. Feng Ling was a little anxious. When she took out the bullet just now, she knew that he had really lost a lot of blood, and his physical strength had long been unable to support. Li Nanheng, just now was the first time I took out a bullet. Every first time in my life is related to you. If you dare to die, I will leave your body in the wilderness and throw you deeper into the jungle to feed those birds and beasts. Li Nanheng suddenly let out a low, hoarse laugh, and at the same time, he coughed because of the laughter, and then said hoarsely, I just closed my eyes for a while and didn't speak. I'm conserving my strength. I promise I won't die. Hearing his answer, Feng Ling suddenly realized that she suddenly panicked. She abruptly withdrew her hand from his shoulder, turned to sit next to him, and said, Don't block bullets for me again. If you do it again, I will never see you again in this life. Li Nanheng didn't know if it was because he was conserving his strength, or because he didn't have the strength to speak, but he didn't speak. As time passed, Feng Ling calculated the time it would take for the nearest rescue team to arrive. After a while, she felt that Li Nanheng's breath seemed to be unusually quiet. She turned her eyes and saw that Li Nanheng's eyes were still closed. Because the bullet had just been taken out, the wound on his shoulder was new and old. Blood was still flowing out, and the ground had been stained with blood. If this continued, he would lose too much blood. Even if he wouldn't die from the bullet, he would still bleed to death. Feng Ling's eyelids twitched, and she abruptly raised her hand to slap his face. Li Nanheng, today, I received a notice that there will be a burst of chapters. I may have to start saving chapters again. As for the specific time, I'll tell you after I save the chapters. Please bookmark this site to read the latest. Bookmark easy to read. Please remember the original domain name of this book. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1050. After patting him a few times, he didn't seem to respond. Feng Ling approached him, looked at his face, and called his name as she patted him. The man's quietly closed eyes moved slightly, and his fingers on his lap also moved slightly, as though he was giving her a response. Feng Ling saw the movement of his hands, and then saw him slowly open his eyes. Suddenly, she didn't know why her heart suddenly ached. She looked at his face and whispered, What do you need to do to hold on? Don't fall asleep? The man opened his eyes slightly to look at her. It seemed that he was unable to smile, but he still moved the corners of his lips slightly, and said in a very hoarse and soft voice, What do you think? Feng Ling didn't understand what he meant, and only looked at him. What do I think? He really didn't understand when he should understand, and he didn't understand when he shouldn't understand. Li Nanheng sighed with a smile, slowly raised his hand, and pointed at his own face. Kiss me. His face was pale, his voice was weak, and his eyes were haggard, but the 3 words he said were still extremely seductive. Feng Ling's heart couldn't help beating hard. She looked at him coldly, stood up, and took a step back. Then you'd better sleep. Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows and said hoarsely, You'd rather watch me die than have anything to do with me? Then go to hell. Feng Ling's eyes were full of impatience. Li Nanheng looked at her, curved his lips and didn't say anything more. He slowly closed his eyes again. At first, Feng Ling thought he was doing it on purpose, but the man's face was unbelievably pale. Although she couldn't see any emotion between his brows, she could feel that he didn't have much strength right now. Seeing that his eyes hadn't opened for a while, she suddenly leaned down again. Li Nanheng, don't sleep. However, the man's eyes were still quietly closed, and he leaned against the tree hole motionlessly, as though there was no reaction. Feng Ling frowned, wondering if she was really too cruel at this time. After all, he was injured because of her. She raised her hand and patted the man's shoulder twice. Wake up. Li Nanheng, don't sleep, wake up. Before she could finish speaking, the man with his eyes closed raised his arms and hugged her. Although he was not strong, Feng Ling's squatting posture was not very stable. She was caught off guard and fell into his arms. When Feng Ling abruptly raised her eyes, the man leaned toward her face. He closed his eyes and held her. His pale face was filled with enjoyment as he said, Just a kiss. Feng Ling pursed her lips and glared at him. Under the man's blissful expression, she pushed him away. I don't think you'll die either. As she spoke, she got up and walked out of the tree hole. The sound of the helicopter has disappeared. I don't know where it stopped. I'll go out and take a look. Looking at the little woman who rushed out angrily, Li Nanheng sat there, his pale lips slightly twitched, and he chuckled. Don't go too far. Be careful. I won't get lost in the jungle, Feng Ling retorted as she walked out. She was about to continue speaking when she suddenly realized that she had spoken too much. She immediately shut her mouth and looked in the direction where she had heard the sound. Feng Ling looked around outside, whether it was on the trees, in the grass, in the sky, on the ground, or in any position that would leave traces. She confirmed that the group of people had not found this place, and this was already deep in the jungle. Those who had never lived in the jungle must have either fallen into a pit or walked in another direction. In this vast jungle, surrounded by dense tall grass, it was likely that they did not know how difficult it was to find the place where she was hiding. After confirming that it was safe, Feng Ling picked a few pieces of grass on the way back. She was not sure if they had anti-inflammatory and hemostatic effects. She remembered that this kind of thing could be used, but she did not know whether it was used to stop bleeding or reduce inflammation. In short, it definitely wouldn't have any worse effect. Walking back into the tree hole, she saw that the man's eyes were still closed. However, when he heard her footsteps coming in, although the man struggled to open his eyes, he looked in her direction and smiled lightly. As expected, you can't get lost, Feng Ling. Feng Ling pretended not to hear him. She walked over and took off the clothes he was wearing behind him. Then she placed the grass she had just picked on a small stone by the side, used 2 stones to grind out the green juice, and then applied it to the wound on his back. Li Nanheng was instantly energized by the sudden tingling sensation. He turned his head to look at the little woman, who was helping him apply medicine. What is this? I don't know. Maybe it's poison. Something that will make your wound fester until your whole body begins to fester, Feng Ling answered impatiently. Hearing this, Li Nanheng was very calm. Is that so? It's not bad to die in your hands. Feng Ling really did not want to talk to him. When she helped him apply the green juice on the wound, she increased the strength of her hands. Only when she heard the man finally could not help but groan in pain, did she slightly ease her strength. In the end, she helped him put on his clothes again, supported him to lean against the wall, and looked down at the time on her phone. Are you sure you don't want to call the police? Just wait for the people from 11 Base to arrive? Based on your understanding of the police, most of their forces work for the people. To deal with this kind of encirclement and attack, their people are just cannon fodder. Why do they have to implicate so many people and bring up the storm of 11 Base? Is there anything that our own people in 11 Base can't handle? Do we need outsiders to help us? Li Nanheng asked mildly. That was true. Only the military and the police had asked 11 Base for help time and time again. 11 Base had never needed their help when they encountered something. After all, there was a huge gap in strength. However, Li Nanheng's words were really arrogant. He didn't put the American police in his eyes at all. Seeing that his eyelids were about to close, Feng Ling reached out to hold his hand. She pressed her fingers hard between his thumb and index finger, and deliberately increased the strength of her hand. This kind of pain could at least ensure that his mind was always awake and active. In this situation, if he really fell asleep, it would only become worse. Do you feel that you can move your injured shoulder? At that time, I didn't control the strength of the knife well. I was afraid that it would hurt your shoulder blade. Feng Ling held her hand and placed it on his lap. He looked at her mildly and did not speak. He did not have the strength, so he just looked at her like this. Chapter 1051. Feng Ling found that he seemed to have a feeling that he couldn't take another look at her. In an instant, anger surged in her heart, and she dug her fingers into his palm, grabbing and scratching him hard, making him feel pain. When he looked at her in confusion because of her inexplicable anger, she glared at him and said, Li Nanheng, from now on, until the people of 11 Base come, I don't want to hear any last words about you. If you want me to live well, you'd better stay awake for me. Otherwise, I don't mind leading those people over, and we'll die together. Li Nanheng looked at her with a slight frown and did not answer. Did you hear that? Feng Ling looked at him coldly. The man smiled lightly. Just a few minutes after Feng Ling sat down next to him, she heard the sound of the helicopter approaching again, and this time it seemed to be accompanied by some sound from afar. She turned to look at Li Nanheng, who was not in a good state of mind, but obviously, he also heard the sound and looked out of the tree hole indifferently. They are a group of people who often wander on the edge of darkness. In order to hide, they must have hidden in places like the jungle before, so they can more or less avoid some dangers. It may take some effort to find this place, but after so long, they are not useless after all. They do have some ability to find this place. Feng Ling quietly put the dagger on her waist, glanced outside, and said indifferently, "You wait here." At this time, Li Nanheng wanted Feng Ling not to take risks, but now was not the time to say this. If one of them didn't go, two of them would also die here. Looking at Feng Ling's movement, Li Nanheng said in a low voice, "Protect yourself. After all, in the jungle, you have a better chance of winning. Watch the opportunity and escape as soon as possible." "You are here. I won't escape." The slender, tall, short-haired woman said this when she walked out of the tree hole and resolutely walked out. Looking at Feng Ling's back, Li Nanheng closed his eyes, sighed, and picked up his cell phone with some difficulty. The tracking signal of 11 base had almost flown to the vicinity of Boston. As long as the target position did not change, within 40 minutes, 11 base's rescue plane would definitely arrive. 40 minutes. If it was someone else, they might not have been able to withstand it, but Feng Ling could. In the jungle, there were layers of green everywhere. Feng Ling quickly shuttled through the tall grass, occasionally hearing the movements of snakes, insects, and ants passing through the nearby grass. Her ears were sharp as she listened to the sounds of those people approaching in this direction. Just when she felt that those people had searched all the way here, and were only 300 to 400 meters away, Feng Ling lowered her head to look at a deep pit covered by tall grass not far from her feet. She then glanced at the several thick old trees by the side, and quickly jumped up the tree. She leaned over the dense tree trunks and looked down. From this angle, she could see that there were about a dozen people coming in. Each of them held a different type of gun in their hands. At such a distance, she could recognize the models of the guns in their hands. She could also tell which guns were powerful, and which ones looked heavy, but were actually not very powerful. She could easily avoid them. After observing the situation clearly, Feng Ling picked up the stone she had just prepared, and quickly threw one to the side 100 meters away. The sound of the stone hitting the tree trunk was not loud, but from the position of the group of people, they felt it was a strange sound, and were immediately distracted by the sound. They all carefully turned to the side, and pointed their muzzles in that direction. Seeing that their attention had turned to her, Feng Ling observed the trees behind them, and took the opportunity to quickly jump down. She bent over in the grass and sprinted forward. She then leaped forward and kicked a man holding a small handgun behind them. The moment she kicked the man, she snatched the gun from his hand within a second. At the same time, when the others suddenly turned their heads, she stepped on the head of the man on the ground who had yet to react, and with a flash, she jumped onto the nearest tree behind them. Then, those people finally realized what had happened. In an instant, gunshots rang out from all directions, all aimed at Feng Ling's direction. Feng Ling used the thick trunk to block the bullets, and the dense leaves on the tree made it impossible for them to find her exact location. Taking advantage of the fact that they were shooting randomly, she jumped to another tree in front of her, but all the directions were in the opposite direction of the tree hole where Li Nanheng was. She dodged the bullets and successfully led the people to another direction and into the grass. More than a dozen people saw her figure, and for a moment, they all chased after Feng Ling. However, after running more than a dozen steps, there was suddenly a few screams. The people who went around to the front looked back with a jerk, only to see that 3 or 4 of their companions had fallen into a pit under the grass. "Damn it! She's playing with us!" The people standing in front roared angrily and fired wildly at every tree around them. However, gunshots rang out from all directions in the jungle. Feng Ling had taken the opportunity to jump back from the next tree, stood on the nearest tree less than a meter behind them, and looked down at them. A group of fools was still shooting at other trees, but they didn't hear the movements in the tree behind them. Feng Ling squatted on it, picked up the gun she had just snatched, pointed it at the back of the leader's head, and pulled the trigger. When the people under the tree heard the sound of the trigger, they subconsciously turned back, including those who had been pointed at by Feng Ling. The moment they turned back, they seemed to have sensed something. However, his reaction was still a step too late. There was a bang in the air, and this sudden bullet pierced the head of the person who had rushed at the front. He suddenly stood there stiffly, his eyes empty, as if he couldn't believe, unwilling, and full of fear. And then he fell heavily to the ground. Seeing this scene, those people were all shocked, and in an instant, they all raised their guns to this tree. Feng Ling's shot was indeed very risky, but at this time, if she didn't kill the leader, the order of this group of people would not be disrupted. She dodged the bullets they fired in time, and looked back at the other nearby tree trunks. Now these people were all surrounding her. If she jumped out, she would immediately be shot full of holes by their bullets. Chapter 1052. Feng Ling weighed the gun in her hand, and estimated that there were still 6 or 7 bullets left in the gun. She looked at the people under the tree, and suddenly fixed her eyes on the man between the trees in front of her. She took out 2 stones from her pocket, and threw them in the opposite direction. Because the speed at which the stones were thrown was too fast, no one knew what they were, but they suddenly heard a female voice from the tree. "Be careful of explosives." When they heard these words, they couldn't immediately tell whether it was real or not. In an instant, they raised their guns and quickly retreated. Feng Ling took advantage of the opportunity when they glanced in the direction of the explosives, to raise her gun, and shoot the 2 men in the head. She then took the opportunity after the 2 men fell to quickly escape to the opposite tree. Taking advantage of the fact that their encirclement was forced open, she quickly continued to run to other trees. However, at this moment, several of them had already noticed her cunning in advance and chased after her. When Feng Ling was about to use the same trick again, they fired first and successfully intercepted her. Feng Ling suddenly lost her footing and fell to the ground halfway. She glanced at the wound on her arm caused by the bullet, and the red mark on the skin of her arm. Noticing that those people were approaching, her eyes darkened and she turned to escape. However, without the protection of the tree, it was difficult for her to be surrounded by more than a dozen people, and the guns in their hands. A good tiger can't defeat a pack of wolves. She couldn't jump up the tree above, so she could only rely on the grass below. But after all, there was not much advantage on the ground. During the 2 minutes of being chased, she had almost no room to fight back. She could only roll around to avoid being hit by the bullets. A group of people chased her relentlessly. They all had spare magazines and didn't lack bullets at all, which was even more disadvantageous for her. In the blink of an eye, 2 people fell into the pit that Feng Ling had just deliberately avoided. When 2 people fell, the guns in their hands fell into the grass, and Feng Ling was suddenly shot in the arm. She endured the pain and leaned over the grass to escape to the other side, only to find that no matter how she escaped, she seemed to be trapped in this encirclement. The point was that she had gone in the opposite direction of the tree hole where Li Nanheng hid. This group of people seemed to notice something, and now forced her to escape in the opposite direction. As a result, when she looked up, she could see the tall tree not far away. Without guessing, she knew that Li Nanheng was still there. She couldn't go over. She couldn't let these people find him. Feng Ling couldn't care less about the people holding guns behind her. She suddenly turned around and ran to the other side. There was no pit here, and there was only a mountain wall ahead. It was a dead end, but for Li Nanheng it was a way to live. She rushed over, and just as she was about to be surrounded, there were still bullets fired in her direction. She was almost shot in the shoulder. Fortunately, she dodged to the side, and the bullet only grazed the skin of her shoulder, but she still felt a burning pain. Suddenly, she seemed to notice the movement of the helicopter above. Although this jungle was dense and deep in the jungle, she found that her and Li Nanheng's cell phone signals were still there, which meant that these people's cell phone signals were also there. No matter where they chased and where they needed support, They could find the people driving the helicopter at any time. At the moment when Feng Ling suddenly realized this, a loud noise suddenly broke out in the sky. Then she raised her head and felt as if something had fallen down. A flash of fire passed through the dense jungle and landed at her feet, causing a huge shock. Feng Ling's eyes trembled, but it was too late. She had been thrown up by the bomb that was suddenly launched by the helicopter. Her whole body was in pain, and she felt as if her internal organs were about to break. She was suddenly blown up and finally fell to the ground 10 meters away. In an instant, she felt as if there was blood in her throat, and she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. The bomb just now was only a meter away from falling directly on her head. That was the pain of being smashed into pieces. But at such a close distance, even if her body was not smashed into pieces, the force of the explosion was enough to instantly cause internal injuries to Feng Ling. She struggled to get up from the ground, but the smell of burning was everywhere. The bomb had caused a fire everywhere. She coughed and spat out another mouthful of blood, but she could not get up no matter how hard she tried. In a blink of an eye, she saw that among the group of people who had also been affected by the bomb, one person had already raised a gun to her head. In the midst of the fire, it was clear that he was going to kill her before leaving. Feng Ling frowned and dug her fingers into the ground. There seemed to be some sounds approaching. She wasn't sure whether it was the enemy or the people from 11 base. She didn't have the energy to distinguish the movements. She just stared at the muzzle of the man's gun. She wanted to avoid it, but she couldn't even move. Someone's coming. We've been surrounded. Suddenly, a few people behind that person shouted. Following that, a group of people hastily scattered in all directions. The man who raised the gun to Feng Ling was about to shoot her and then leave. But at the moment he pulled the trigger, he suddenly heard a gunshot. Then, Feng Ling saw the man who pointed the gun at her suddenly fell straight down. When he fell, she raised her eyes and saw Li Nanheng standing not far away with a pale face. The gun in his hand was the one that the two people who had fallen into the pit had dropped on the ground. He actually came out from inside. He was injured like this, but he could still walk out. Feng Ling looked at him in disbelief. Just as she struggled to get up from the fire on the ground, she suddenly saw people rushing out from all directions. When she saw that those people were all wearing the uniforms of 11 base, her heart finally relaxed a little, and she instantly let herself lie on the ground powerlessly. The feeling of being blown up in her chest was so painful that she felt as if blood was about to gush out. But when the blood reached her throat, she swallowed it hard. Boss! Han Jin and Xiao Su hadn't seen clearly the man lying in the fire not far away. But when they saw the wound on Li Nanheng's body, they hurried over to support him. Then Kay, who came forward with a sniper rifle, looked in that direction. He didn't expect to meet the person he hadn't seen for 2 years here. When he saw it clearly, he suddenly let out an incredulous voice. Feng Ling. Chapter 1053. Kay's cry of surprise attracted everyone's attention to the man lying on the ground. Feng Ling slowly raised her head from the ground and looked at them with her pale, blood-stained face. They hadn't seen each other for 2 years, and now that they were reunited, she didn't know how she felt at this moment. She only remembered the scene when she left, and her hands dug deeper into the ground. Seeing that she seemed to be seriously injured, Kay hurriedly handed the sniper rifle in his hand to his brother behind him, rushed up, bent down, and hurriedly helped her up from the ground. Seeing the blood on her mouth and her staggering appearance, he frowned. You, Feng Ling gasped and said hoarsely. Just now the bomb above landed by my feet. Kay immediately held her steady in disbelief, and his voice suddenly became serious. Then hurry to the hospital. Quick. Feng Ling didn't have more strength to speak. When 2 familiar 11 base brothers came up to help support her from behind, she heard the conversation between Han Jin and Xiao Su. Boss, why didn't you tell us that you found Feng Ling? Li Nanheng didn't answer. He was also supported by them. At this moment, both of them were seriously injured. There were many things that should and should not be said. It was as if they could only understand each other in their hearts. Li Nanheng just looked at Feng Ling and said indifferently, Get on the helicopter and go back to the base. Is Dr. Wen coming with us? Call her over, and let me take a look at her first. Han Jin and Xiao Su looked at the wound on Li Nanheng's back. They wanted to say that his injury was not light, but after all, Boss said so. And even though it had been 2 years, they all knew that Boss Li had been looking for Feng Ling crazily in the past 2 years. Now if they didn't let Dr. Wen take a look at Feng Ling first, Boss probably wouldn't let the doctor touch him. Alright, let's go. As Han Jin spoke, he winked at the people around him. Some of them had already gone to chase after the scattered groups. At this moment, there were still the sound of several helicopter propellers approaching, but this time, not only the enemy's planes, but also 11 bases planes were controlling above, so the enemy couldn't find an accurate position to throw explosives for the time being. The area behind Feng Ling was already on fire. In this kind of jungle, any fire was very dangerous. Her chest hurt so much that she felt as if her whole body would split open at any time. However, when Kay and the others were about to help her out nervously, she said in a low voice, "I won't go back to 11 base. Just send me to the hospital." Although her voice was low and soft, almost everyone around her could hear her. Kay immediately looked at her in disbelief. "Feng Ling, do you know that Boss Li has been looking for you for 2 years? In the past 2 years, Boss has been trying to find a way to get you back. 11 base can't live without you." What Grandfather Li did was not reasonable at all. Boss is the person in charge of the base. As long as Boss says you can return to the sniper team, you will still be a member of our 11 base. Shouldn't you go back now? Feng Ling didn't have much emotion. When she was supported by Kay to walk out, she swallowed the blood in her mouth and struggled to support her energy at this moment. But she still said with difficulty in a low voice, "I won't go back." As soon as she said this, Li Nanheng had stopped walking forward and turned back to look at her. At this moment, Feng Ling also raised her head and looked in his direction, only to see his pale face and calm eyes. Feng Ling, Han Jin and Xiao Su held Li Nanheng's hand and kept paying attention to the wound on his back. They frowned and said, "It's not easy for Boss to find you. There was a misunderstanding at that time. At that time, we already knew your gender, but we didn't expose you. Most people in 11 base still accept you. Don't feel ashamed or hurt because of what those bastards of Team 3 said. We can all understand you. Now that you are injured, let's go back together." I'll say it again. Feng Ling listened to their words, looked straight into Li Nanheng's eyes, and said word by word clearly, "I, Feng Ling, swore 2 years ago that in this life, I will never step into 11 base as a trainee of 11 base. Even if I die here, I will not go back. Feng Ling, I know you are unhappy, but now is not the time to make trouble. Don't make trouble." Kay whispered beside her. Feng Ling's eyes were indifferent. "I'm not making trouble. Let me go. I'll go by myself." "Are you kidding me? How can you walk like this?" Kay said as he looked at the blood on her mouth. "You vomited blood. Who do you think you are? If you can walk out of the jungle like this, I can call you Grandma." Feng Ling's pale face was expressionless, and she tried to stand upright when she was supported by Kay. She didn't have any intention to rely on anyone in 11 base. Deep in her bones, there was already some kind of hatred and shadow of 11 base that was influenced by obsession. Xiao Su held Li Nanheng's arm and felt that Boss Li's body temperature was decreasing bit by bit. Boss was seriously injured, but obviously, what hurt him more was Feng Ling, who seemed to have abandoned him. Facing the person he hadn't seen for 2 years, Xiao Su looked at Feng Ling and said, "Feng Ling, we know you have hatred in your heart, but your hatred is also because you once loved him. Just like your hatred for 11 base, that is because you once loved that place deeply. Just like your hatred for Boss Li, it is also because you once loved." "I've never loved." Feng Ling frowned. Li Nanheng's eyes, which were almost unable to focus because of his serious injury, suddenly focused because of her words, and his dark and deep eyes looked straight at her. Xiao Su was speechless because of Feng Ling's decisive words. Looking at this girl who was driven out of the base, but now was obviously more ruthless than all of them, he found that even though he knew she was ruthless, he couldn't find a word to blame her. Yes, anyone who saw her lying on the ground outside the hall of 11 base and being humiliated, slandered, and driven out of the base by several elders could understand her feelings. If it were anyone else, they would not be willing to step into that place again. You've never loved, have you? At this time, Li Nanheng's low, hoarse voice sounded. Even though it was weak because of excessive blood loss, it was still particularly clear and cold in the quiet jungle. Feng Ling didn't look at him, but looked away. I want to chat with more like-minded people about young Master Mo. Have you kissed enough? Talk about life. And find a confidant. Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1054. Seeing that she was unwilling to look at him, Li Nanheng slowly narrowed his cold eyes. Feng Ling, I have never been as honest to anyone as I am to you in my life. Feng Ling was still supported by Kay, and leaned against Kay weakly. She looked at the tree trunk not far away, and refused to look at the man. Whether you hate or resent what happened 2 years ago, I can give you a reasonable explanation. Even if you can't understand, at least I won't allow these misunderstandings to happen. I told you again and again that I didn't marry any woman, but you never believed me. Fine, I was too confident at that time. I thought that I could take care of both inside and outside, but I ignored your feelings. So I deserve everything that I'm suffering now. The man's low voice sounded haggard and tired, hoarse and cold. No matter what happened, I have never hidden anything from you. I am calm and fearless. My heart is at least pure and sincere to you. But when you deny everything that happened in the past, you also deny yourself, right? Li Nanheng's voice was so cold that both Han Jin and Xiao Su could feel the coldness in Boss's heart at this moment. In addition, they had been holding him, feeling that his body temperature was decreasing bit by bit. They wanted to say that they couldn't delay any longer, or Boss would lose his life. But now, they didn't dare to say a word, and could only try their best to support him. Under the gaze of the brothers of 11 Base, Feng Ling didn't say anything more, but just replied, "There's no need to deny it. Nothing happened." Hearing this, Kay immediately pinched Feng Ling's arm hard, reminding her not to challenge Boss's bottom line. Boss had been looking for her for 2 years, and had finally found her after much difficulty. Furthermore, both of them were heavily injured, so why did they have to hurt each other at this time? However, it was clear that Feng Ling's heart had been sealed to the point where nothing could enter. Even the slightest change in her expression was suppressed by calmness. After she returned from the dangerous situation, there were some things that she should have thought through 2 years ago. She should have held on to them back then, so that she wouldn't have left covered in wounds. Li Nanheng looked at her, as if he couldn't see all the members of 11 Base around him. He only looked at her face and asked, "Have you ever loved me?" The members of 11 Base had heard about the relationship between Feng Ling and Boss Li before, but it had always been a wild rumor, and everyone was skeptical. Later, when they learned that Feng Ling was a woman, although they were surprised, at least they didn't have other ideas like those bastards in Team 3. But now that they saw this scene and heard this sentence, all of them held their breaths and didn't dare to make a sound. "No," Feng Ling answered straightforwardly. Li Nanheng immediately sneered. His laughter seemed to come from his chest. The man's pale face seemed warm under the reflection of the flames behind Feng Ling. But upon closer inspection, it was extremely cold. "Never liked it?" he asked again. Feng Ling's hands slowly clenched into fists. "No." Li Nanheng sneered at her. "Ridiculous." Kay felt that his heart was almost frozen by this scene, and kept muttering in his heart, "My little princess Feng Ling, don't provoke Boss anymore. Look at Boss, take a look at him." However, Feng Ling obviously couldn't feel Kay's worry. She just leaned against his side weakly and said in a low voice, "My life in Boston is peaceful. The kidnapping you encountered that day was just a coincidence. The source of the matter is not me. I'm not in any other danger. Thank you, Boss Li, for saving me once. But today I also saved you once, so we're even." Li Nanheng just looked at her and didn't speak. Everyone felt that Boss Li should be exhausted. They knew that they should quickly help him back, but now no one dared to move or say a word, especially Han Jin and Xiao Su beside Li Nanheng. Facing Boss Li, who was almost broken into pieces, and Feng Ling, who was as hard as an unbreakable iron stone, They didn't even dare to breathe. Have you ever loved me? Li Nanheng seemed to be unwilling to give up and asked again. But this time, his voice was calm and low, which made people's hearts cold. Feng Ling frowned as if impatiently and answered hoarsely, yes. Li Nanheng suddenly sneered, abruptly shook off Han Jin and Xiao Su's hands, staggered and barely stood still. He looked straight at the woman who refused to turn her head to him, and asked with gritted teeth. Let me ask you again, have you ever loved me? At this time, Feng Ling finally turned her eyes and met his gaze. Instead of analyzing the emotions in his eyes, she replied coldly, yes, Li Nanheng. It's just a relationship that has no result, and doesn't need a result. I'm still young and ignorant, but I've never loved you. I've never loved you. Li Nanheng froze there, looked at her, and was silent for 5 seconds. Feng Ling also looked straight at him, her eyes full of firmness, indifference, and relief, as if she could finally say goodbye to her poor self 2 years ago. Just when Han Jin and Xiao Su couldn't stand it anymore. Feeling that Boss Li had never been so frustrated in their lives, they rushed forward to support him. But the man in front of them ignored their outstretched hands, waved them away expressionlessly, and suddenly walked straight toward Feng Ling. It was only a distance of 5 or 6 steps, but every time the man took a step forward, his face became paler and bloodless. Feng Ling didn't know what he was doing, and just watched him approach. He didn't know what to do now. He was about to speak, but Feng Ling, who was being supported by him, was suddenly grabbed by the man approaching him. She was also seriously injured and couldn't support her body at all, so she stumbled into Li Nanheng's arms. Feng Ling thought he was crazy. When she was about to ask him if he was crazy, the man suddenly clasped her chin, bent down, and kissed her hard. Her eyes widened in an instant. She wanted to push him away, but she didn't have the strength to raise her hands. Her entire body was imprisoned in the man's embrace. He hugged her waist and back, kissing her fiercely, as if he wanted to strangle her alive. She only felt that there was a certain taste of blood in both of their mouths. When the taste of blood mixed together, she felt pain all over her body. It was so painful that even her lips and tongue were bitten and sucked by the man cruelly and fiercely. But she didn't feel it. Her entire body was a little stiff, and she wanted to struggle but couldn't. She was kissed crazily in front of everyone. I want to chat with more like-minded people about young Master Mo. Have you kissed enough? Talk about life, and find a confidant. Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1055. Everyone was shocked, but no one dared to stop them. What a joke. This was the first time Boss had kissed a girl in public. Most importantly, the one being kissed was Feng Ling. Even if the two of them were covered in blood and looked battered and exhausted, the visual stimulation was still exhilarating. Yes, that's how it should be. If you love someone, then so be it. What's there to hate? If you don't want to admit your love, then just give it a kiss. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Of course, Feng Ling couldn't hear the cheers in the hearts of this group of people. She just frowned and wanted to push the man in front of her away. But Li Nanheng seemed to use all his strength to hold her. And the force on his lips was so fierce that she couldn't resist it. Her body was already unable to hold on, and now she was seeing stars. She wanted to push him away, but she was still powerless, and could only lean against his arms to support herself. She didn't know what was wrong with this man, but he kissed her fiercely. Just as she was about to suffocate, he suddenly let go of her, and said hoarsely in a voice that only she could hear, "Remember what you said today." Feng Ling's eyes were a bit stiff. She looked at the man in front of her, but before she could see the emotions in his eyes, she suddenly felt a weight in front of her. The man suddenly pressed his whole body against her. She immediately realized that Li Nanheng finally couldn't hold on anymore. Kei quickly held her from behind. Han Jin and Xiao Su also rushed forward to support Li Nanheng, who had fainted in front of Feng Ling. Boss Li. Boss. Feng Ling, however, was supported by Kei and stood motionless. She looked stiffly at the pale-faced Li Nanheng, who was being helped up by them. Looking at his closed eyes, she felt as if there were countless knives grinding hard in her heart, causing her pain. Seeing the old and new wounds on Li Nanheng's back, Xiaosu suddenly looked at Feng Ling with red eyes, stared at her pale face, and said word by word, "Kay, send Miss Feng to the hospital." Kay immediately frowned. "Aren't we going back to the base? Take her to the hospital," Han Jin also said, but he didn't look at Feng Ling again. Instead, he quickly called someone over to send Li Nan hang out. He had lost too much blood. If he stayed here any longer, even his iron body couldn't bear it. Kay didn't speak anymore. Feng Ling stood there. She didn't know if the fire behind her had already begun to burn. But it was so painful that even her whole body felt as though it had been burned. Kay sent her to the hospital as Feng Ling wished. Although he was injured by the explosion, fortunately, there were no external burns. The pain in his internal organs was also due to the huge shock he received at that time. He needed a long time to recuperate. Because there were no external or internal injuries, there were no blood clots, and he could not undergo any surgery. Therefore, Feng Ling only stayed in the hospital for 2 days. After being forced to stay there for observation for 2 days, she went home. But the community where she lived, because of what happened at that time, had been cordoned off by the police. Because the police had to investigate the scene, no one was allowed to enter. So she simply went to live in the martial arts club. There were several temporary rest rooms and dormitories prepared for coaches. Although it was only a very simple half-person bed, and a small room of only 6 or 7 square meters, it was enough for her to live in. She didn't lack anything. After sending Feng Ling to the hospital, Kay was originally guarding her. But then he was called away for some reason. Feng Ling didn't tell anyone. When she came back, it was a weekend night. There was no one in the martial arts club. She opened the door, found a rest room, and lay down without even turning on the light. Her whole body was still in great pain, and she was completely exhausted. In the past 2 days in the hospital, she hardly slept much. Even if she fell asleep, she had been having messy nightmares, and her mental state was in a state of tension that she couldn't understand. When it was almost dawn, she finally fell asleep. Vaguely, she seemed to hear something outside, the conversation between the head coach and the boss, and the voices of other familiar people working here. The door of her room was closed, and no one knew she was here. She closed her eyes to sleep and didn't intend to get up. In the afternoon, Feng Ling got up from the bed with some difficulty. The pain all over her body hadn't disappeared. She sat in the room for a while, and then took a look at the time. Today was Monday, and she still had 2 classes to attend in the afternoon. Although her current condition might not be suitable for class, she was already here. Even if she only used the verbal method to attend class and did not do much, it would still be the same. Anyway, they were all students for a long time, and she did not need to teach them everything. Thinking of this, Feng Ling got up and went out. When she stood up, she was still a little shaky, but fortunately, she could still stand. When she walked out of the rest room, the head coach happened to come here to get something. Suddenly seeing Feng Ling coming out of the door, he looked at her in surprise. "When did you come here? You've been missing for the past 2 days. I couldn't find you on the phone. I heard that something happened to your place. The boss and I were about to go to the police station to report it. Why are you?" "It's okay. Sorry to make you worry. I slept here last night." Feng Ling explained and walked out. The head coach looked at her pale and haggard face, and turned to ask her a few more questions. Feng Ling didn't answer, but went straight to the classroom. In the afternoon, during the class, Feng Ling sat in the front seat and watched them have class. Chun Beiqing was in this class, and Chun Beiqing had been paying attention to her. He felt that she didn't look good. She seemed to have lost a lot of weight in just 2 or 3 days. She didn't look right. Originally, he planned to ask her what happened after class, but when the class was only halfway through, a group of people in black uniforms broke in and broke the peace in the martial arts club. Feng Ling was asked to leave. All the people in the martial arts club looked at those people in black uniforms, standing in 2 rows from the door to the inside. Looking at their majestic appearance, they couldn't guess what had happened. Feng Ling was called out. She walked out and saw that these people were wearing the uniforms of 11 base. She stood inside and looked at the door without saying anything. Then a man in the same black uniform came in. but his armband and chest tag were more than others, so it could be seen that he was not a simple person. It was Han Jin. Feng Ling looked at him. Han Jin came in expressionlessly and walked up to Feng Ling. "Miss Feng, come with us." Feng Ling was stunned. Feng Ling raised her eyes. "I've already said what I should say. Where do you want me to go?" Han Jin's tone was indifferent. "Boss hasn't woken up yet. You have to go with us. When he wakes up safely, I will let you go immediately. I want to chat with more like-minded people about young Master Mo. Have you kissed enough? Talk about life. And find a confidant. Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version website M. Chapter 1056. There was a hint of surprise in Feng Ling's calm eyes. "Still not awake? Come with us." Although Han Jin's attitude was cold, he was not too tough on her. He just looked at her and said, "You should know boss's identity. If he really dies here, all of us will have to bear the consequences. You must go with me now. In addition, the remaining members of the drug gangs have not been cleaned up yet. Some of them already know about you. It is not safe for you to be outside alone. After the boss wakes up and gives us new instructions and arrangements, we will act according to his arrangements. Now first, for the sake of the boss, you have to go with us. Second, for your safety, you have to go with us." "I'm safe here," Feng Ling said calmly. "Why do you have to break the peace of my life? You are living very peacefully. Do you know how turbulent the base has been these 2 years? Does 11 base still have anything to do with me? Even if the entire 11 base is gone, it doesn't seem to be my fault." Feng Ling looked at him coldly. "Han Jin, I don't owe 11 base anything. But you owe Boss Lee a favor." "Do I owe him anything?" "This kind of thing, only the two of you know. After all, I am an outsider." Han Jin said faintly, "You don't look very well. Did the doctors in the hospital observe your injury for a few days? Dr. Wen happened to be here, and Miss Wen also came here. You are close to Miss Wen. Let her take a look at you." Han Jin's words were very polite, but it was obvious that if she dared to resist, the members of 11 base would definitely take her away, and it was very likely that the entire martial arts club would be implicated. Kay didn't come, nor did anyone who was familiar with her, because as long as those people came, many of them would be soft-hearted towards her, and would not forcefully drag her away. Han Jin knew her too well, so since he wanted to take her away by force, he wouldn't let those people come over. The people standing in 2 rows were all elite members of 11 base. They were also people who rarely interacted with Feng Ling. They didn't have any intimate feelings for her. If she resisted, they could even pull out their guns and shoot her. What's going on? The head coach didn't understand what was going on. Although he had long known the relationship between Li Nanheng and Feng Ling and 11 base, now the martial arts club was surrounded by people from 11 base, and they were obviously going to take Feng Ling away. Seeing Feng Ling's reluctant look, he walked out, subconsciously shielded Feng Ling behind him, and then looked down at her. "It's fine. They're all old friends. Let me go with them," Feng Ling said indifferently. "Old friend, where are you going? Do you need to make such a big fuss?" The head coach frowned with a cold face, and turned to look at Han Jin. Seeing this head coach's unkind eyes, Han Jin didn't speak, nor did he pay attention to his eyes. He just passed him, and continued to look at Feng Ling, who was standing in place. "Let Miss Wen take a good look at your injury. If you really have any internal injury, you can't delay it. Otherwise, if you have any old disease in the future, it won't be worth it. What's wrong with you?" The head coach looked at Feng Ling, and looked at her carefully. He had felt that she looked very pale before. In this way, a lot of things that others didn't know had happened to her in the past few days. "It's nothing. I'll go with them." Feng Ling didn't want to explain, nor did she want to tell them about the drug gangs, bombs, and guns. Only those who stayed in 11 base all year round didn't feel anything about these things. Others who lived in a peaceful world were not suitable to get involved in it. "It sounds like our coach Ling has a special relationship with 11 base." Several students had just walked out of the classroom. After watching for a while, they lowered their voices and whispered to each other. Chen Beiqing looked at Feng Ling, who was almost surrounded by a group of people, and then at the head coach who was obviously ignored by everyone. Thinking of the various similar movements he saw on the so-called intern coach a few days ago, it was not difficult to see that many things Feng Ling learned were taught by that person. Chen Beiqing walked over and looked at Feng Ling. If you don't want to go, don't go. Feng Ling didn't speak, but Han Jin looked at Chen Beiqing coldly. Boy, don't talk about things that don't belong to you. Be careful not to get yourself into trouble. I'm talking to my woman. What does it have to do with you? Chen Beiqing glanced at him mockingly. Your woman? Han Jin looked at him as if he had heard some news, and then looked at Feng Ling who was speechless and obviously didn't have the energy to explain, and then looked at him with a sneer. What's your name? Do you think you've lived too long? Chen Beiqing was about to speak, but Feng Ling quickly turned around and pressed his arm, signaling him not to speak. All right, I'll go with them. They are all my old acquaintances. They won't do anything to me. Don't worry. Hearing Feng Ling's words, Chen Beiqing looked at her and asked in a low voice, Are you from 11 Base? They are 11 Base in Los Angeles, the mysterious and powerful military base, under the name of the United Nations? Feng Ling didn't explain. She just glanced at him and said in a low voice, Don't be nosy. Just be yourself. Other things have nothing to do with you. Now they want to take you away by force? Feng Ling lowered her eyes and said indifferently, Their boss was injured because of me and hasn't woken up yet. I do have the responsibility to go and see him. Who is their boss? Chen Beiqing guessed something, but still wanted an accurate answer. Li Nanheng. Chen Beiqing looked at her for a moment and said, You have such great ability at such a young age. Did he teach you? Feng Ling nodded. No wonder. No wonder every time Li Nanheng appeared in the classroom, she was either the one who was abused, or the one who couldn't integrate into the two of them. It turned out that he was the real boss. This was also the secret that Coach Ling had kept here for 2 years. Chen Beiqing clenched his hands into fists, looked at her haggard face, and said again, I still say the same thing. If you don't want to go, you don't have to. Don't force yourself. At this moment, Han Jin winked at the people behind him, and 2 people came forward to help Feng Ling to the side. Although they helped her, they obviously kept a distance between her and the 2 men. Miss Feng, let's go. Han Jin didn't bother to deal with these people, and just looked at Feng Ling. Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1057. Feng Ling was about to turn to leave, when Chen Beiqing suddenly raised his hand to hold her wrist and stared at her. At this moment, silence spoke louder than words. Feng Ling knew what he wanted to say. Sorry, Feng Ling said as she gently pushed his hand away, then turned her eyes to the other people in the martial arts club, and finally to the head coach's face. She nodded politely and gratefully to him, and then turned to follow Han Jin out. After walking out of the martial arts club, Feng Ling saw the tall 11 base cars parked outside. For a moment, she felt that everything she had lived in the past 2 years was just a fleeting cloud, and everything in front of her was familiar. Even though 2 years had passed, she didn't feel strange at all. Go to the first car. Han Jin didn't look happy. After walking over with Feng Ling, he opened the car door and turned to look at her. Get in the car, Miss Feng. It seemed that after this reunion, every time Han Jin called her Miss Feng, his tone would be colder. Feng Ling turned to look at him. His bullet didn't hurt his vital parts. He just lost too much blood. Why hasn't he woken up after so long? Has it been that long? Only 2 days have passed. Han Jin said calmly. I know you don't want to see him. Coincidentally, if he wakes up now, I don't want you to appear in front of him again to stimulate him. He really hasn't woken up. Dr. Wen, Miss Wen, and Dr. Qin, who happened to come to Boston for business, have all come. But he still hasn't woken up. We can't find the reason. Maybe he is too tired to look for you in the past 2 years, and suddenly can't move. He wants to sleep for a few more days. Feng Ling's fingers slowly clenched. So the reason you called me over is, get in the car first. Feng Ling turned to get into the car. As soon as she sat in, Han Jin closed the door expressionlessly, walked around the car, opened the door, and sat in the driver's seat. Only then did Feng Ling notice that the others who followed her were all in the cars behind, and only she and Han Jin were in the first car. Han Jin said casually while starting the engine, "If anything happens to Boss Li, do you think I will let you off?" Hearing his words, Feng Ling was not surprised. She knew very well how loyal Han Jin and Xiao Su were to 11 Base and Li Nanheng. Han Jin and Xiao Su took good care of her. Firstly, it was because of their relationship in the base, and secondly, because Li Nanheng treated her differently, so they paid special attention to her. Otherwise, how could she have had such a great honor to go to Han Jin's place to get wine as she pleased? She turned to look at the scene passing by quickly outside the car window, and gently placed her hand on the car window. "So are you taking me to 11 Base or somewhere else?" Dr. Wen and his friend opened a private hospital in Boston. It's not suitable to go to a public hospital for gunshot wounds. You can either go back and treat it yourself, or find a private place. Dr. Wen's place is not a problem. Because Boss is seriously injured, we're temporarily staying in Boston. As Han Jin spoke, he pressed the rear lights of the car to signal the car following behind him. Then, he drove the car into a main road at the side of the fork and drove straight forward. Through the rearview mirror, Feng Ling could see the martial arts club getting farther and farther away until it disappeared. She had a strong hunch that she might not be able to come back to this martial arts club. Even if she came back, she might not be able to work normally again. Thinking of the look in the eyes of the head coach and Chun Beiqing just now, they could clearly see it. After she left, it was uncertain whether they would meet again. Feng Ling leaned against the seat. Even if Han Jin just said he would not let her off, she still sat there relaxed, because the person beside her was someone who knew her very well. She didn't need to be vigilant. She just thought that after 2 years, she finally lived a normal life outside, and finally learned a little bit of human nature. But in the end, it seemed that everything did not belong to her. "If you're tired, go to sleep. It will take at least half an hour to drive from here to the private hospital under Dr. Wen's name." "It's okay. I'm not tired. You look very pale. Why don't you stay in the hospital for a few more days?" "It's not necessary," Feng Ling said and asked, "Why did Miss Wen come to Boston?" "Dr. Wen's contract with 11 Base has expired and may not be renewed. There are private hospitals under his name all over the United States. He plans to integrate them into a large hospital chain and find a place to settle down." Miss Wen directly quit her job in Los Angeles Hospital and chased after him everywhere. Wherever Dr. Wen went, she would go. "You probably don't understand the grudges between the brother and sister. Even I don't understand it," Han Jin said as he took a thin blanket from behind and threw it on her. "Cover it and sleep for a while." Although he said he would not let her off, and looked as if he was going to take revenge on her, he still couldn't bring himself to do it. Feng Ling looked at the thin blanket that was suddenly thrown into her arms, gave a faint smile, and gratefully covered her legs and body. She sat there and looked at the cars following in the rearview mirror. Most of these people look familiar, but they seem to be our batch of newcomers. It seems that these people are now qualified to enter the elite team. They are still far behind you. Han Jin was still driving seriously. Feng Ling turned to look at him. "Are the 4 people in the sniper team still the same?" "5. Feng Ling paused. "That's right. There have always been 5 places. I took someone else's place. When I leave, someone has to quickly replace me, lest it affects the training of the whole team. There is no substitute. They have been waiting for you to go back. Every time there is a sniper team activity, they will prepare a set of weapons and uniforms for you. In the past 2 years, your things have been piled up in your original room. Kay and Lin Cheng have helped you tidy up. You have never left 11 Base." Feng Ling was silent for a moment. Han Jin continued to drive as he said, "When we drove you out of 11 Base, it was just the words of the elders at that time. In fact, 11 Base, a place supervised by the United Nations, must have an official document to expel any mature member. At that time, there was nothing. They just let you go verbally, which meant that you were still a member of 11 Base in name. You just left temporarily. Feng Ling, you still belong to 11 Base." Feng Ling didn't know whether she was surprised or not, But something that seemed to have died in her heart was beating again bit by bit. Did she still belong to 11 base? Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version, am. Chapter 1058. When they arrived at Dr. Wen's private hospital in Boston, the specifications of this hospital were not small. It looked very simple on the outside, but after entering, they saw that the inside was well equipped. Although it was a private hospital, it was no less than the largest hospital in the United States. Even the medical staff here were very well educated, and many of them were top doctors in the medical field. After arriving at the hospital, Han Jin asked if Boss Lee had woken up, and got the answer that he hadn't woken up yet, and was still under observation. He turned back and gestured for the others to send Feng Ling to the ward upstairs. Sending her to the ward was to let her have a good examination of her previous internal injuries. Since Feng Ling was already here, she couldn't refuse. She just walked while thinking that the blow on Li Nanheng's neck was indeed not light. This time, the coma caused by excessive blood loss might be related to the injury on the back of his neck. Hopefully, it didn't hurt his mind or nerves. Otherwise, it would easily affect his physical condition in the future. Although she was very familiar with many vulnerable parts and acupuncture points of the human body, she was not a doctor after all. She did not know how badly he was injured. In her memory, when he was in the car, his back and the seat were bleeding like a river. In short, his injuries were not light. After entering the ward, a young female nurse came in and helped her change into light clothes, which was a light-colored hospital gown. Then, she took her to do a few tests and sent her back to rest. The ward that they arranged for her had a TV, internet, a built-in bathroom, a sofa, a coffee table, and a kitchen. It was a ward that was similar to a high-end luxury suite. The bed was not white like a normal ward, but it was mostly light-colored. It seemed that even if she stayed here temporarily, she would not feel uncomfortable. It was exactly the feeling between a normal suite and a ward. It was very cozy, and this room was more than 10 floors above the hospital. The downstairs of this side of the window was a residential area, not a downtown area, so it was very quiet. The boss of the martial arts club had just called her. Feng Ling took the phone and briefly said something about herself. Then she heard someone knocking on the door of the ward. She hung up the phone and turned back to see Wen Leching. Wen Leching pushed the door open and walked in. When she saw Feng Ling sitting by the bed, her eyes lit up. "I thought you were resting. Why aren't you asleep?" Feng Ling was very calm. "If it were you, would you be able to sleep if you were suddenly brought here by a group of people from 11 base? Wen Leching didn't know much about how Feng Ling was brought here. Hearing her words, she smiled, walked in, and looked at Feng Ling's face carefully. "You're also injured, right?" "I know Han Jin brought you back, but I don't know how he brought you back. I think he knows your temper and wants to take you to treat your injury, but you definitely won't agree. Maybe only by forcing you will you obediently give in." Wen Leching didn't know how Feng Ling was brought here. Feng Ling didn't say anything more about this matter. She just looked at her. "You quit your job at Los Angeles Hospital?" "Okay." Wen Leching smiled. Feng Ling was not a gossipy person, nor was she too curious about other people's affairs. But she did feel a little curious about the matter between Wen Leching and Dr. Wen. But at least she could restrain her curiosity. She just nodded and didn't ask more. "I heard from them that you were seriously injured. Why? Didn't you see a doctor in the hospital?" Wen Leching said as she came over to take Feng Ling's hand, touched it, and then looked at her. "I just heard from them that you seem to be injured by a bomb. Did you go to take an X-ray?" "It's okay. The shock will definitely make me uncomfortable for a while. When I was on a mission in 11 base, I often encountered a bomb close to me. As long as it doesn't fall on my head, it's not a big deal." Feng Ling was about to take her hand back. Wen Leching still took her hand and looked at her. "Feng Ling, these 2 years, did you tell him that I was here, or did he find out by himself?" Feng Ling asked in a low voice. Wen Leching looked at her for a while, and then smiled. "I helped you hide it for 2 years. How could I suddenly tell him?" That was it. Sure enough, she had been hiding so well. But in the end, She still exposed all her whereabouts because she went to participate in a competition. As when Leching spoke to her, she checked her body, and then got up to call the doctor in the hospital to arrange an X-ray for her, saying that she needed to check her internal organs and other injuries. Feng Ling had been checked in the hospital before, and remembered that the doctor said it was not too serious. Besides, she didn't really want to stay in the hospital for observation. So in the end she left. Seeing that there were no relatives or friends around her, the doctor let her go and didn't care about her anymore. But when Leching couldn't let it go, so Feng Ling had to cooperate with the doctor to take an X-ray, and then go back to the ward to wait. Not long after, when Leching came back with her X-ray, and looked at her with a relieved look. Fortunately, it's just a temporary fluctuation of your internal organs caused by the violent air vibration. You may feel pain, but the injury is not serious. Don't do any strenuous exercise recently. You must keep a good rest. You will be fine in a few days. With that, Wen Leching helped Feng Ling lie down by the bed, and then looked at Feng Ling. She seemed to want to say something, but after a while, she finally took back her words. Everything these people wanted to say was, because of Li Nanheng. Feng Ling knew it in her heart. Seeing that she didn't say anything, she didn't take the initiative to ask. She also knew the reason why she was forcibly brought here. Just when Feng Ling thought that Wen Leching would let her rest alone after she had nothing to say, Wen Leching suddenly said, "Do you want to accompany Nanheng?" Feng Ling didn't have any expression on her face, and just looked at her. "Why? There is no one in his ward." Feng Ling looked away. "It has nothing to do with me. I was forcibly brought here not to see him. You know in your heart whether you want to see him or not. Women can understand women. You are too unsociable and strong-willed. So of course you don't want others to see your most vulnerable side. Just like when you were driven out of 11 Base 2 years ago. You didn't even shed a tear or complain after you woke up," Wen Leching said gently. "Just like now, you clearly miss him in your heart, but you refuse to admit it. Now there is no one else in his ward, so you don't have to worry that someone will see it. Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version website, m. Chapter 1059. In fact, Feng Ling didn't know what she was thinking, but under Wen Leching's persuasion, she temporarily gave up the idea of not going to see Li Nanheng. Since he was already here, she might as well go and take a look at his injury. After all, he was injured because of her. Walking to the door of Li Nanheng's ward, Wen Leching waved at her, motioning her to go in quickly. Feng Ling hesitated, pushed the door open and entered. The ward was very quiet. Li Nanheng seemed to be still unconscious. Feng Ling looked at the door for a while, then walked in, walked to the bedside, looked at the man lying quietly on the bed, and then looked at the ring-shaped medical device on his neck to fix the cervical vertebra. Even with such a strange white ring-shaped thing, it didn't affect the man's appearance at all. She knew that this thing probably had something to do with the displacement of the cervical vertebra or the injury on the back of his neck. Then she saw the translucent white tape on the back of the man's hand, because he had just had an injection. The man's hand was quietly placed on the bedside, and even his fingers didn't move. He really didn't wake up. Feng Ling stood by the bed and watched for a long time. She recalled how he sat in the tree hole and looked at her with a pale face. She recalled how she coldly denied everything that had happened and how he looked at her when she said that she had never loved him. She looked at him for a long time until she suddenly saw the man's hand quietly placed on the quilt, seemed to move slightly. Then she looked carefully and saw that his fingers seemed to move. She looked at the man's pale face again and saw that he seemed to show signs of waking up, and his handsome brows were faintly furrowed. Wen Leching was guarding outside the ward when she suddenly heard the door open. She looked back and saw Feng Ling coming out. "Why don't you stay in there a little longer? He may be waking up soon. Call Dr. Wen and the others to come and see him," Feng Ling said, and walked in the direction she came from. Wen Leching watched her leave without hesitation, turned back to tell the nurse, and then chased after her. She didn't let Feng Ling go back to the ward directly, but took her to do several other examinations on the way, and then asked her to go back to the ward to wait. It was getting dark. 3 hours had passed since Feng Ling visited Li Nanheng's ward. In the past 3 hours, except for checking her condition, she stayed in the ward and did not go out. Nor did she see anyone from 11 base. When it was dinner time, the hospital sent in a special nutritional set meal. The food was placed in the ward, and the taste was light and fragrant. Feng Ling did not have much appetite, and did not eat it. She sat on the bed alone, but her eyes were looking out the window. When Wen Leching came in again, the food was already cold. Seeing Feng Ling didn't eat, Wen Leching walked over. "Why don't you eat?" "I'm not hungry. You seem to be under house arrest by the people of 11 base. In fact, they are just concerned about your health. I just met Han Jin. He didn't explain anything. He only said that you are a member of 11 base. Without the permission of the base, you are not allowed to work in other places. They didn't care about you for the past 2 years, but now that they have found you, they won't let you mess around outside." Han Jin had said this to her once before. Although he didn't say it so specifically, Feng Ling understood what he meant. "I see." Hearing Feng Ling's calm words, Wen Leching looked at her for a while, then went out to call the nurse in to take away the cold dinner, and asked them to send a new one. When the new dinner was sent, Wen Leching urged Feng Ling to eat it. Under her gentle and enthusiastic attack, Feng Ling ate a little, but she didn't have a big appetite. After eating a little, she put down the tableware. At this time, someone knocked on the door. Wen Leching turned to open the door, and Feng Ling turned to see Dr. Wen, whom she hadn't seen for a long time. "How is he?" Dr. Wen looked away from Wen Leching's face, and turned to look at Feng Ling, who was sitting by the bed. "I've looked at a few of her radiographic films. She's in good condition. She was just affected by the shock caused by the explosion, and her organs were temporarily displaced for a few seconds, causing severe pain in her internal organs. However, there's no bleeding or internal injuries. She seems to be fine," Wen Leching said, and looked warmly at the man in a white coat in front of her. "Brother, has Nanhing woken up?" Dr. Wen didn't seem to see Wen Leching's gaze, and walked in front of her. When he came to Feng Ling, he looked at her complexion. "It's good that there is no serious injury. When you were in the base, I watched you grow up. It's not easy for you to grow from a skinny 13-year-old to what you are now. It doesn't matter whether you are a man or a woman. The important thing is to live happily and casually. People should at least learn to live for themselves." "Feng Ling, have you found your life goal in the past 2 years?" Feng Ling smiled. "Dr. Wen, you sound as if you're already so old." He remembered that Dr. Wen was 2 years older than Wen Leching. Wen Leching seemed to be only 25 years old since she graduated, and he was only 27. He said he watched her grow up and treated her like an elder. However, looking at him and Wen Leching, one was cold and indifferent while the other was gentle and passionate. If the shackles of brother and sister were thrown away, they really seemed to be a good match. And Wen Leching and Dr. Wen didn't look alike at all. No matter in appearance, temperament, or other aspects, they didn't look alike at all. Except that they were both excellent, they were really different. They didn't look like brother and sister at all. "I'm 7 years older than you. Am I still young?" Dr. Wen asked with a smile. "Feng Ling, brother, Nanhing is the same age as you. Are you trying to make him grow up with you, so that there will be a generation gap between her and Nanheng?" Wen Leching complained with a chuckle. Dr. Wen ignored Wen Leching behind him, and just looked at Feng Ling. Although there was a kind smile in his eyes, Feng Ling could see the usual elegance and distance in his eyes. He cared about her from the perspective of a very familiar old friend. "Dr. Wen, I remember that a long time ago, when I was still in the base, I was injured once when I was 15 years old. You asked me in the infirmary what kind of life goal I had. At that time, my answer was that it was enough to have hot food, a warm house, and a bed. Living was my life goal. And my answer is the same now. It has never changed." Chapter 1060. It's a good thing that you haven't changed. At least you're as simple as ever. I don't mean simple here. Dr. Wen pointed to his head and looked at Feng Ling. You're a simple and rational person. You won't think too much about things, so you won't be very tired. Dr. Wen was an elegant, calm, and transparent person. Although Feng Ling didn't fully understand what he was trying to say to her, she still nodded. I'll go to see your X-ray later. Even if your injury is not serious, you'd better stay here for a few more days to see if there are any other changes. Don't leave in a hurry. Feng Ling nodded. Even if Dr. Wen agreed to let her leave, Han Jin wouldn't let her go. Then take a rest and eat more. Don't eat so little. Dr. Wen gave her a simple reminder and turned to walk out. Wen Leching followed him and asked softly when she came to the door of the ward. Has Nanheng woken up? Why didn't brother mention Nanheng? Although her voice was very soft, Feng Ling's ears still heard it. She just sat by the bed calmly. Dr. Wen stopped and looked back at the little woman, who had tied her long hair into a ponytail behind her. His eyes paused on her face for a second, and then he looked away indifferently, saying, She woke up. She is still lying in the hospital bed. What's there to talk about? Hearing that, Dr. Wen's eyes fell on Gu Changle's face. Didn't he say he wanted to see Feng Ling? No, he didn't. Wen Leching immediately stopped talking and just looked at Dr. Wen. Dr. Wen also looked at her again, didn't say anything, and left directly. Seeing that he ignored her again, Wen Leching subconsciously wanted to follow him, but thinking that Feng Ling was still in the ward, she didn't leave but just closed the door. When she looked back, she saw Feng Ling sitting on the bed silently. Although she didn't speak, Feng Ling heard their conversation. Before Li Nanheng fainted, he whispered in her ear with his last consciousness. Remember what you said today. Feng Ling lowered her head, picked up the spoon again, and scooped a mouthful of soup into her mouth. Wen Leching knew that Feng Ling's hearing was very good. Seeing that she didn't speak, she couldn't guess what she was thinking. So she walked back to sit beside her, and watched her somewhat mechanically and numbly send soup and various kinds of food into her mouth. Nanheng must have just woken up. She has been in a coma for a long time and suddenly woke up, but her consciousness hasn't recovered yet. Seeing that Feng Ling didn't speak, Wen Leching felt strange sitting there alone. The person they had been looking for 2 years was finally found and forcibly brought here by Han Jin. It was impossible for them not to tell Li Nanheng about this, but he had already woken up. But he didn't say he wanted to see Feng Ling. Was Li Nanheng's brain damaged? On the second day after Li Nanheng woke up, Feng Ling obediently rested in the ward and did not go out. She did not hear any order from Li Nanheng to see her. On the third day after Li Nanheng woke up, he didn't see her. On the fourth day after Li Nanheng woke up, he didn't see her. On the fifth day, it was said that many well-informed people from the hospital specially came to visit. It was said that Li Nanheng's ward was very lively today, but she didn't see him either. Feng Ling slept in the ward again and again. When she woke up, it was already afternoon. All of a sudden, Wen Leching pushed the door open and came in. Feng Ling, someone wants to see you. Feng Ling turned her eyes and saw a couple walking in behind Wen Leching. They looked somewhat familiar, but also somewhat unfamiliar. Behind the couple, a little girl about 6 years old walked in. The little girl's eyes were very bright. After entering the ward, she looked left and right, her face filled with curiosity. Feng Ling tried hard to search for memories of this couple in her mind. When the lady came up excitedly to hold her hand, Feng Ling finally remembered. Mr. Ted and Mrs. Ted? Feng Ling asked curiously. Mrs. Ted immediately looked at her with an agitated expression. She held her hand and said, Mr. Feng. Oh no, Miss Feng, before this we didn't expect you to be a girl. Back then, you saved our family's lives, especially our daughter. Back then she was still so young. You threw her into the sea and handed her over to the rescue team. Back then, I wasn't decisive enough on the cruise and almost caused you to lose your life as well. Feng Ling finally had a more perfect impression of this middle-aged woman in her 30s. She did not expect to meet the mayor of the Foy State, Mr. Ted, and his wife here. Back then, when their family was kidnapped, she did have some recollection of what happened on the cruise to save them, especially when she fell into the sea and was later rescued by Qiao Fei on an island in the middle of the sea. That was the first time the secret of her gender was discovered, so she had a rather deep impression of this incident. Mr. Ted also walked over He smiled politely at Feng Ling. Miss Feng, you Chinese have a saying. The grace of saving a life is unforgettable. Our family is very grateful to you for risking your life to save us. My wife has always held a grudge against you for causing you to fall into the sea. I did not expect to meet you here. Nor did I expect that there would be such an impressive girl like you in 11 base. On behalf of our family, I thank you for your kindness. There's no need to be so polite. This is my responsibility for every mission I took in 11 base. It's something I should do. Seeing Mr. Ted suddenly bow to her, Feng Ling immediately stood up. The person before her was a mayor. As a small character, she felt unworthy of such a gesture. Feng Ling was truly embarrassed. She did not know what to do in such a situation. Mrs. Ted continued to hold her hand. Our family has already moved from Foy State to Los Angeles. My husband's work has also moved from there to Los Angeles. Right now, he is not the mayor of Foy State, but the deputy minister of Los Angeles City Hall. Next year, he is expected to run for the new mayor of Los Angeles, so we have more interactions with 11 base. When I heard that something happened to Mr. Lee, my husband specially came over to take a look. I did not expect you to be here as well. Back then, they had specially gone to 11 base to wait for Feng Ling to thank her in person. However, Feng Ling was injured and hospitalized back then, so she could not see them. It was indeed fate that they met here after 2 years. Although Feng Ling did not know much about the mayor or minister, she knew that Foy State was a small city with almost no reputation in America. It was also a newly established city. Los Angeles was different. To be able to hold such a high position in Los Angeles City Hall and have the qualifications to run for the mayor of Los Angeles, it was clear that Mr. Ted was quite impressive. Chapter 1061. At this moment, the little girl who had been following behind the Mr. and Mrs. Ted approached Mrs. Ted's back. She stood behind Mrs. Ted's leg and carefully peeked her head out to look at Feng Ling. All of a sudden, she spoke in slightly stuttering Chinese. "Elder sister, you're so beautiful." Hearing that the little girl had learned Chinese, Feng Ling immediately glanced at the little girl in surprise. She recalled that when she saved her 2 years ago, this child was still very young. Back then, she had been screaming and kicking in her arms out of fear. Now, she had actually grown up so much. "Miss Feng, we've heard some things about you. We also learned that you haven't completely left 11 base in name. Right now we have a request. We're not sure if you can agree to it. Please speak. Because my husband is running for mayor of Los Angeles next year, you should be very clear about the situation and environment in the United States. There are many potential dangers. It's not a big deal for adults like us, but our daughter is too young. I'm afraid that she might encounter kidnappings, extortion threats, and so on. So, during the election year next year, we need to hire a powerful person to be my daughter's personal bodyguard and accompany her every day." At this point, Mrs. Ted looked at Feng Ling with some embarrassment. "Coincidentally, we learned that you're a girl. Although you're a member of 11 base, it seems like you won't be returning for the time being. We also know that you're skilled and have a good character. You've even saved our daughter before, so we wish to hire you to be our daughter's bodyguard." Hearing this, Feng Ling did not immediately respond. She lowered her head to look at the little girl, who was currently blinking at her. "Actually, it won't be long. It's almost the end of the year. There are still 9 months until next year's election. As long as you stay by our daughter's side and protect her for 9 months, you'll be able to regain your freedom. When you're by her side, don't worry. We'll definitely give you the best treatment and arrangements. After our family leaves, we'll help you make the decision. We'll talk to the elders of the Lee family and ask them to restore your right to return to 11 base. Everything will naturally take its course. This matter is extremely beneficial to both you and our family. Thus, we hope that Miss Feng can consider it." Feng Ling did not wish to return to 11 base. Even if she was forcefully brought back, she did not feel the need. Mr. and Mrs. Ritter's request seemed to her to offer herself a new choice. Since she was still a member of 11 base, she could take it as being sent by the base to carry out a mission to protect the minister's daughter. a mission that would last less than a year. However, it seemed that she could no longer stay in Boston. Seeing that Feng Ling did not speak, Mrs. Ted looked at her expectantly. Miss Feng, regarding our request, do you have any other requests? As long as you are willing, we will try our best to satisfy you. No request, I agree. Wen Lecheng didn't want to intervene in this matter. After all, it had nothing to do with her, but when she heard Feng Ling agree so readily, she took a look at her and asked softly, "Don't you need to tell Nan Hung about this?" It was indeed necessary to inform the person in charge of 11 Base about such matters. However, the Ted couple were still officials of the city hall. They only needed to raise their request. The problem lay in the fact that they respected Feng Ling's wishes and had personally come to ask for her permission. Just because of this, they didn't directly ask the base hall to give her a mission notice. Instead, after learning that she was here, the family of 3 came in person, which was enough to show their respect for her. Faced with such a family, Feng Ling had no reason to reject them. After all, to her it did not matter where she was. As long as they did not force her to return to 11 Base, it did not matter. Nan Hung has woken up. I think you'd better tell him. Wen Lecheng suddenly paused as soon as she said this. Li Nanheng had indeed been awake for several days. Furthermore, his recovery was not bad. His consciousness was clear, and he was not affected in any way. However, he did not mention anything about Feng Ling, nor did he mention that he wanted to see her. It was as though this person had never existed. Several times, when Wen Lecheng was in his ward, she vaguely mentioned that Feng Ling was also staying in this hospital. However, Li Nanheng remained expressionless. It was as though he did not hear or feel anything about Feng Ling's name. He only calmly changed the topic and did not respond. We'll inform Mr. Li right away, Mrs. Ted hurriedly said with a smile. There's no need. I've already left 11 Base for so long. There's no need to inform anyone. I can directly leave with you, Feng Ling said. However, if we must go through the proper procedures, since this is related to the Los Angeles City Hall, we can just inform the base. We can skip the other procedures. Mrs. Ted and Mrs. Ted nodded. However, they deeply respected Li Nanheng and planned to inform Mr. Li before leaving. However, seeing that Feng Ling did not seem to wish to mention him, they did not say much since they were not clear about the situation. That night, Feng Ling learned that Mr. Ted's family's request had already been approved by 11 Base. Tomorrow morning, she would be able to return to Los Angeles with them. That night, Feng Ling packed up her things. Wen Lecheng also helped to call someone to bring her things over to the place she had previously stayed. As she rearranged her things, she glanced at the small velvet box placed in her luggage. She opened it to take a look. Inside was the jade pendant with the word Feng engraved on it. She only glanced at it before silently placing it back into the box. She did not take it out again. The next morning, just as Feng Ling was about to leave, she learned that Mr. Ted and Mrs. Ted's car had yet to arrive. While waiting, she walked out of the ward. For some reason, she walked to Li Nanheng's door. Looking at the tightly shut door in front of her, Feng Ling stared at it silently, his words still echoing in her ears. Remember what you said today. She stood outside the door for a long time until her phone rang. She picked it up and heard the polite voice of the chauffeur sent by Mr. Ted and Mrs. Ted. Miss Feng, the car has arrived. Please head downstairs. Feng Ling responded and hung up the phone. She turned to return to her own ward to retrieve her luggage. Just as she turned around, suddenly, the door behind her that had been tightly shut all this time opened. The foreshadowing of the plot is basically over. The 9 months in Mr. Ted's house should be over in a few strokes, and won't take up too much space. Soon, we'll move on to the domestic and high city plots that you want to see. Chapter 1062. The moment the door of the ward opened, Feng Ling saw Dr. Wen coming out. Dr. Wen's gaze landed on her. Leaving. Hearing these words, Feng Ling understood. They likely all knew where she was going. Li Nanheng also knew. However, he did not say anything to her, nor did he request to see her. This was also good. At the very least, This was the result she had always wanted. Fengling nodded. Be careful. It's a good thing that you can follow Mr. Ted's family. This experience will be a good stepping stone for you in the future. Furthermore, you'll be able to get closer to the city hall that we rarely get involved with. 11 Base will no longer have any reason to look down on you. Of course, 11 Base has never looked down on you. Back then, it was only the stubbornness of those elders that led to this outcome. You should know that everyone likes you very much. Thank you. Fengling did not speak more. She glanced at the open door behind him. This room was very large. From the angle of the door, she could not see the bed, nor could she see that person. She directly turned to leave. She returned to the room to retrieve her luggage, and then left the hospital. Mr. Ted's family indeed treated Fengling very well. Rather than saying that they had invited her back as a bodyguard, it was more accurate to say that they had invited a distinguished guest. Regardless of whether it was in terms of treatment or other aspects, it was even better than that of a wealthy family's young miss. However, Fengling was clear about her responsibilities. She would accept things that she should accept and avoid things that she shouldn't enjoy. Every day, she would strictly protect the couple's daughter. She was responsible for sending her to school, attending various classes, and watching over her when she returned home. Any dangerous situations would not escape her eyes. She protected the little girl very well. Mr. Ted's family trusted Fengling more and more, and their relationship grew closer. Often when they attended large banquets, Fengling was only supposed to be a bodyguard in secret. However, they insisted on bringing her along, and had her dress up simply. However, Fengling refused to wear gowns, so they prepared several neutral suits for her to wear. Every time she wore those suits to attend a banquet with Mr. Ted's family, the couple's daughter would hold her hand and say, "Sister Fengling, you're so handsome and beautiful. If you could grow your hair long, you'd definitely be as beautiful as a princess." Fengling was often amused by the little girl. Ever since Fengling became a bodyguard at the Ted couple's home, she had not contacted those people, including Li Nanheng. She had not received any news from him, and he had not barged into her life without permission. Even when they occasionally met at a banquet, they would only brush past each other. Even though she had passed all the training at the base, and was often at the same standard as the instructors, coming in first in every test, and had almost completed everything she needed to learn in the sniper team, she was clearly not qualified to be a member of the team, regardless of whether it was her age or qualifications. But if this recommendation letter was personally written by the deputy mayor of Los Angeles, then it would be a different story. Fengling knew that the Ted couple was trying to help her. However, she did not really want this help. To her, if the Ted couple were to request 11 Base to send her to Africa, or somewhere even further, it would be best if she never returned. However, this recommendation letter had already been written. Furthermore, she had only received a copy. The document had already been sent to 11 Base 2 days ago. It was too late to retrieve it now. Right now, Fengling was not too sure if there had been any changes to the management of 11 Base. However, she felt that with the elders of the Li family around, there was no way she would be able to return. Furthermore, with her identity as an instructor, wasn't this a slap to those elders' faces? However, she did not expect that the base would actually accept Mr. Ted's recommendation and hire her to be an intern instructor at the shooting range. Please remember this book's domain name. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1063. Nearly 3 years ago, she was once an unwanted member of 11 Base, lying on the ground and being watched by everyone. She had to leave in embarrassment. But now, she was going to take the invitation letter from 11 Base and invite her back to be a drill master. Fengling didn't know how to react until Ah Feng and Xiao Su came to pick her up on behalf of 11 Base. Fengling looked at Xiao Su and Ah Feng and asked the question in her heart. Didn't you not accept women? It's elderly who doesn't accept women, not 11 Base, Ah Feng said. Besides, there is a loophole in the rules and regulations of the base. They don't allow women to be trained, but it doesn't say that they don't allow women to spoil them. So Drillmaster Feng, please get in the car. Feng Ling. Who found this loophole? Who took advantage of this loophole to take her back so openly? Except for Li Nanheng, she couldn't think of a second person, and it was impossible for a second person to have such great ability to bring her back like this. When she left, she had lost all her face, but now it seemed that she had regained it all. Even if she returned to 11 base now, no one would dare to say a word of objection. But Li Nanheng hadn't contacted her for a long time. Even after such a long time, every time they met, they just brushed past each other. Even if they occasionally looked at each other, that man's eyes were only cold and indifferent, without any extra feelings. As if he was just a stranger. You go back first. If I want to go back to the base, I will go back by myself. Feng Ling didn't get in the car. Ah Feng and Xiao Su looked at her in confusion. The base sent a car to invite you back. Don't you understand the current situation? They are helping you find what you lost on the day you left. What did she lose? Her pride. However, for Feng Ling, she had already left 11 base for more than 2 years. It had already been nearly 3 years. If she continued to stay outside like this, she could walk any path she wanted. There was no need for her to only have 11 base in her eyes. But if she went back in their car now, her world would return to its original state. This original state was the most peaceful and happy place in her world. And it was also the way of life she used to insist on. As long as she could live well in the base, it was her goal in life. Later, Dr. Wen asked her about her goal in life, and she said that she just wanted to live well. But now she didn't want to be tied to 11 base. Even if he wanted to go back, now was not the time. There's no need for that. I'll pick up my lost pride myself. I don't need anyone to help me. Ah Feng frowned, and Xiao Su looked at Feng Ling in confusion. You should be able to tell who arranged this for you. There's only one person who can make you go back like this. Feng Ling did not answer. She handed the letter to Ah Feng and turned to walk back. She did not get in the car, nor did she intend to leave now. Xiao Su looked at the employment letter in Ah Feng's hand, and then at Ah Feng. She's refusing. It's an obvious rejection. Ah Feng sighed softly. The elders did go too far. After all, she has made countless contributions to the base, and she is still a young girl. No matter how generous she is, I'm afraid there will be a knot in her heart. This knot has nothing to do with dignity or face, but the barrier in her heart. Hasn't Boss Li been trying to help her overcome this hurdle? The problem is that she won't accept it. Before coming, Boss didn't say anything. I think Boss Li understands her temper the best and knows that she won't accept it. That's right, Boss should have guessed it. Mr. and Mrs. Ted's daughter could not bear for Feng Ling to leave. Ever since she heard that Feng Ling was about to leave, the little girl would hug Feng Ling and cry for a while every day. Humans were sentimental creatures, especially towards innocent children. Even someone as decisive as Feng Ling could not bear to part with her. After dragging on like this for a week, she finally had to leave. The little girl hugged her and cried loudly again. Feng Ling coaxed her and said that she would come here often to visit her in the future. After giving her a promise, the little girl tugged at the corner of her clothes and walked out while crying. After leaving the Ted couple's home, Feng Ling was looking for a place to stay. She did not plan on returning to 11 base. She thanked the Ted couple for sending her a car and went out to hail a taxi. She stood by the roadside and looked at her phone while waiting for a taxi. All of a sudden, a white Ferrari stopped in front of her. Feng Ling raised her head. The car window rolled down and Qin Sighting's face appeared before her eyes. 20 minutes later, Feng Ling and Qin Sighting sat down at a nearby coffee shop. Feng Ling's heart was filled with respect for people like Dr. Qin and Dr. Wen, who fought against the King of Hell with a scalpel. Furthermore, Qin Sighting had saved her life before, so she was especially respectful towards him. I've heard a little about your matter. Qin Sighting placed a cup of coffee with sugar and milk in front of her. Are you used to this kind of coffee? Feng Ling nodded. I'm fine with anything. I'm not that picky. Qin Sighting smiled. When the waiter brought up another cup of Americano, Feng Ling looked at the black Americano bitter coffee in front of him and immediately placed the coffee with sugar and milk in front of her closest to her. Watching her actions, Qin Sighting discovered that although she appeared calm and emotionless, she was actually a little cute deep down. However, this cuteness of hers could only be discovered by those who were willing to discover it. For example, Li Nanheng. Qin Sighting took a sip of coffee and said, "If you don't want to go back to the base for the time being and want to do something outside, I have a job for you, but it might be a little far from America." "What job?" "Recently, Mr. Mo's wife needs a trustworthy bodyguard. You know the relationship between Mr. Mo and 11 Base. His wife is a very good person. Even if you become a bodyguard, your treatment will not be worse than that of the city hall. In this way, you will have a reliable job, and Mr. Mo will have a reliable and trustworthy person like you. You can also temporarily leave Los Angeles, which makes you unhappy. You can kill 3 birds with 1 stone. Do you want to consider it?" Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1064. Mr. Mo's wife? Feng Ling looked at him. "Is she the person you said saved Mr. Mo's life last time?" "It's her. Her name is Jin Wan. She is the daughter of High City's G Group and Mo Jingshan's wife." Qin Sighting smiled. "When Mo Jingshan had an accident in Los Angeles, you were still training in the base, but the accident was very serious. Nanheng was also injured, but his injury was not as serious as Mo Jingshan's. He went back to the base alone to recuperate. I guess you don't know what happened at that time. A few years ago, Feng Ling was still young and lived peacefully in the base, so she didn't pay much attention to it. However, she had certainly heard of Mr. Mo's name. Although he had never appeared in the base, he was a godlike existence in the mouths of many people in the base. Feng Ling knew that Mr. Mo was a person who was highly valued and respected by 11 Base, and she heard that his hands were never stained with blood. He only occasionally acted as the think tank of 11 Base, but he was clear-headed and decisive. As long as Mr. Mo took action, no one could defeat him. Even Li Nanheng had some respect for Mo Jingshan, this so-called brother. They had always been brothers who would help each other, as long as they told each other what they needed. For a man like Mr. Mo, the wife he loved the most would definitely be a good woman. "High City, is it far from here?" "It's in China. It's across half the world. Do you think it's far?" Feng Ling looked at Qin Sighting. "Why me? Before I came to the United States, Mo Jingshan happened to be looking for a good bodyguard. I know this. After I came here and heard about you, I thought you might not be willing to return to 11 Base. But we can't let you go to a place where we can't find you. Then why don't you be Mrs. Mo's bodyguard? No matter in martial arts or other aspects, you are absolutely trustworthy." Feng Ling didn't speak for a while. Qin Sighting looked at her. "Do you want to do it? Even if I want to go, will 11 Base let me go?" Feng Ling threw the question back to him. "You are now a drill master hired by 11 Base. Nominally, you are still connected to 11 Base, so in fact there are many things you can't do. If you want to go to High City, you may need Li Nanheng's consent and signature. Without his signature, it will be difficult for you to leave the United States." Feng Ling paused. "You want his signature?" "Of course," Qin Sighting said calmly. 11 Base is not a simple place in America. Previously, when you went to work as a bodyguard for Mr. and Mrs. Ted, they were from the city hall. All they needed was a document to hire you. However, this time, you took the initiative to go out, so you needed the approval and signature of the person in charge of the base. Feng Ling didn't want to go back to Li Nanheng at all. She didn't even want to have anything to do with him in the future. But she didn't expect that the opportunity to leave the United States and go to China to take a look at the bustling high city was actually in Li Nanheng's hands. "Is there no other way?" "No, your name is on 11 Base. Without special permission, you can't leave the country. You can't pass the customs." Feng Ling looked at the coffee in front of her and gently rubbed the cup with her fingers. "I understand. A few days ago, the person who refused to return to 11 Base suddenly appeared in 11 Base. This news really confused the brothers, Most importantly, when Feng Ling, who had left the base for 2 days, finally walked into the gate of 11 base again, she just looked ahead and walked toward the base hall. She didn't seem to be nostalgic at all, nor did she look around. Instead, the brothers who passed by and saw her spread the news among themselves, saying that Feng Ling had returned. Feng Ling went to the base hall. Seeing her return, Feng Feng's eyes lit up. "You've thought it through and are willing to come back? At that time, we specially drove to pick you up, but you refused to go back. How did you come back? Did you drive yourself or?" "Ah Feng, if I want to leave the country, must I get the signature of the person in charge of the base?" Feng Ling asked directly. Ah Feng's expression paused for a moment. He looked at her. "Leave the country? Where are you going?" "China, High City." "What are you going to do in High City? I haven't heard that you have any relatives or friends in High City." Ah Feng paused. Feng Ling was an orphan. How could she have relatives? She had never been to China, let alone friends there. "Mr. Mo's wife needs a bodyguard. They think I'm suitable. I also think I can go to High City to have a look," Feng Ling said calmly. "If I ask you to sign for me and allow me to leave the United States, can I?" "Mr. Mo's wife. I do know that Mr. Mo plans to choose a person to protect Mrs. Mo in 11 base. But he hasn't decided on the person." "How do you know this news?" "I met Dr. Qin." Dr. Qin rarely intervened in other people's affairs, unless Mr. Mo personally asked Feng Ling to go over, or unless Boss Li also knew about this matter. Dr. Qin would not casually intervene. Then, Ah Feng was not sure about this matter. The members of the base have to follow the rules when they walk in the United States. If you want to leave the country, especially now that you are an intern drill master of 11 base, if you want to leave the country, you have to get Boss Li's signature. Apart from him, is there any other way? No, even Mr. Li can't do it. Feng Ling didn't speak, looked at Ah Feng for a while, and turned to walk out. "Hey Feng Ling, where are you going?" Seeing her fierce back, Ah Feng hurriedly chased after her and asked in a low voice. "I'm going to find Li Nanheng." Feng Ling didn't look back. "Do you know where to find him?" Feng Ling paused and looked at the familiar 11 base outside. She had been away for more than 2 years, but nothing seemed to have changed. All the training grounds, all the team camps, everything was still the same. But it seemed that there were some changes, such as the transfer of personnel. So many people's residences must have been changed. At this time, Feng Ling suddenly looked at the square in front of the base hall, looking at the ground where she had once lied miserably before leaving. Everything that had happened back then was still vivid in her mind. When she was about to turn around and ask Ah Feng a few more questions, at this time, several brothers who used to be friends with her came in to take something. Suddenly seeing Feng Ling, they looked at her excitedly and joked. "Hello, Drill Master Feng." The corner of Feng Ling's mouth twitched, but she turned to see Ah Feng with a kind smile on his face, obviously welcoming her return. Please remember this book's domain name. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1065. The other 4 members of the sniper team have been arranged to live in another building, and the training camp has also been moved there. Boss Li still lives in the same place, but you may not be able to find him at this time. Why? He's not at the base. Ah Feng nodded. Grandfather Li is old. He was hospitalized due to a stroke and almost died. Fortunately, he was saved. Recently, he has been lying in bed to recuperate. Boss Li hasn't returned to the Li family in the past 2 or 3 years, but now the pillar of the Li family is about to collapse. No matter how angry Boss is, he has to go back to take a look. When will he come back? I'll wait for him. I'm not sure. Why don't you sit here and wait? No. Tell me where the sniper team is. I'll go and have a look. Ah Feng smiled. Aren't you afraid that if Kay and the others see you, they will tie you up in the training camp and never let you out again? Feng Ling's eyes were calm. They don't have the guts. Ah Feng raised his eyebrows. That's right. If it were in the past, perhaps those boys would do such a thing. But after all, they all knew that Feng Ling was a woman and Boss Li Koff, who dared to touch her. It was simply suicidal. After all, she hadn't been back for 2 years. Those familiar and unfamiliar places flashed before her eyes one by one. Feng Ling thought that her heart wouldn't waver. But in fact, when she walked to the training camp of the sniper team, the places she passed by all made her heart flutter slightly. Especially those little boys who used to call her Master Feng Ling, in the past 3 years, had transformed into young men and were seriously training in the training camp of Team 4. Feng Ling was in the training camp of Team 4. When she passed by the training camp of Team 4, she glanced inside and didn't disturb them. She went around to the front and continued walking. Right now, the training camp of the sniper team was located in the largest training ground in the south of the base. It was originally a special training place for the elite team, but now it was said that the elite team had set up a special training camp outside the base, which was many times better than the facilities here. In this way, 11 Base should have expanded a lot, set up a lot of training camps, and recruited a lot of people. This situation put a lot of pressure on the military, but no matter how dissatisfied the military was, they could not easily compete with 11 Base. In the sniper team's camp, the 4 members were currently proficiently picking up the large sniper rifles that they couldn't even hold properly in the beginning. Even unsteady gunshots rang out one after another. Feng Ling stood outside and watched the backs of the 4 people training. She looked at the sniper rifles in their hands and did not speak. She did not go in to disturb them, but for some reason, she felt her hands itching. Even if she did not want to come back to be a drill master, she missed these sniper rifles very much. Watching them training here, she actually had an urge to go in and pick up a gun to try it out. Feng Ling suppressed this impulse and did nothing. She just looked at the 4 people inside. Tam was the first to notice Feng Ling. He originally turned back to call the instructor over to help him reload the bullets. But when he turned back, he suddenly saw someone from the corner of his eye. He abruptly turned his eyes to see Feng Ling standing outside the training camp and staring at them without blinking. Feng Ling. Tam thought he had seen wrongly and cried out in surprise. Kay and the others were all holding their guns and preparing to shoot again. When they heard Tam's voice, they hurriedly turned to look at him, followed his gaze, and turned to look at Feng Ling. Everyone's eyes were filled with surprise, and the surprise was instantly dyed with joy. Feng Ling. It's really Feng Ling? Oh my god, Feng Ling is back. Feng Ling did not want to disturb them, but she did not expect to be discovered so quickly. She did not want to interact with the other people in the base, nor could she be bothered to exchange pleasantries. However, facing the 4 people in the sniper team, she was still willing to interact with them. She smiled faintly at them. Since she had been discovered, she no longer hid and walked in. She had only taken a few steps when Lin Cheng and Lei Peng rushed forward and lifted her up. Tam did not care whether Feng Ling was a woman or a man. He also came over and lifted Feng Ling over his head, excitedly throwing her up. The few of them shouted loudly and threw Feng Ling up a few more times until Feng Ling cried out in a low voice, "Put me down, quickly put me down." Only then did the 3 of them put her down laughing. Feng Ling was not used to their enthusiasm. She took a step back, only to see that the 3 of them were staring at her as though she was an alien. She was wearing a set of light women's sportswear. It was black, the same color as the uniform they were wearing, but it was clearly very different from before. At least the outline of her chest was no longer deliberately concealed. At least her once pitifully short hair, although it was still short, at least it was longer than the length of her ears, making her look much gentler. Kay stood by the side, holding the sniper rifle in his hand against the ground. Watching Feng Ling being raised up high and thrown down by the 3 of them, he smiled. "Feng Ling, I heard that this time you came back. You were directly hired by our base as an intern instructor of the shooting range, right? Beautiful. This is really a slap in the face to those Eldersley. You came back in style. It really makes me happy to hear it." Tam's eyes shone as he spoke. As he spoke, he looked at Feng Ling's face and couldn't help but turn his head to Lei Peng's ear to say, "After this Feng Ling became a woman, no matter how I look at him, I feel that he is beautiful. Back then we hung out together every day. Do you think there's something wrong with my eyes? I actually couldn't tell that he was actually a girl. Lei Peng sneered. You only King think about guns. When have you ever thought about girls? You speak as though you saw through it back then. It's mainly because we were too familiar with each other. I always thought that Feng Ling was just a slightly petite brother. How could I think so much? Right, Kay, back then when you were so close to her. You also didn't realize it, right? Lei Peng turned to look at Kay. Kay raised his eyebrows and looked at Feng Ling. Then we really have to settle the score with Feng Ling. After being deceived for so long, she still provoked us and hurt us before leaving. In the past 2 years, how much effort did we put in to find her? But she didn't come back after receiving the employment letter. She came back so late after so many days. I wonder what she was doing. Didn't you always say that 11 base is your home? Now you can go home with your head held high. Do you not want to go back? Chapter 1066. The reason Kay asked this was because 9 months ago in the Boston jungle, he saw Feng Ling's ruthlessness and decisiveness, and her rejection of Li Nanheng and 11 base. He had been worried that Feng Ling might not come back. After waiting for so long, she finally came back, but he instinctively felt that things wouldn't be so simple. At least, with Feng Ling's personality, she wouldn't agree to come back so easily. Yeah. The news of you being hired as an intern instructor has spread throughout the base. All the brothers who have dealt with you before and don't hate you are happy for you. Only those people from Team 3, who always oppose me, feel like they have been slapped in the face. Their faces are all dark. The few of us feel really good when we see them. We've been waiting for you to come back all this time. Lin Cheng said as he stepped forward to hold Feng Ling's wrist. Come. You haven't held a sniper rifle in 2 or 3 years, right? Come and try it. Let's see how Feng Ling's marksmanship is now. Has it deteriorated? How could it have deteriorated? You don't know that 9 months ago in the Boston jungle, Feng Ling faced more than a dozen people alone. But she wasn't afraid at all. If it weren't for the sudden explosion from above, she would have killed more than a dozen people by herself. Kay said as he looked in Feng Ling's direction expectantly. In the past 3 years, we've almost caught up to you. Feng Ling really missed the sniper rifle. Lin Cheng dragged her over, and she didn't refuse. Originally, Tam thought that he was just borrowing their sniper rifle to play with. But when he received the signal from Lin Cheng and the others, he immediately turned to the weapon rack by the side, took out a new sniper rifle from it, and quickly walked over to hand it to Feng Ling. Feng Ling looked at the sniper rifle in her hand, then lowered her eyes, and saw her name written on the nameplate below. She raised her eyes and looked at Lin Cheng in confusion. This is the sniper rifle that the base custom made for each of us when our sniper team moved to the new training camp. You have one too. Everything that you should have, not a single one was left behind. Lin Cheng said, You've always been a member of our sniper team. You've never left. Back then, boss said that you only accepted a temporary assignment and temporarily left the base. But everything that belongs to you still exists. 11 base has always been waiting for you to come back. And we have always been waiting for you to come back. Feng Ling held the gun in her hand and looked at the target silently. She stood there for a long time without moving. All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Try out your new gun. Lin Cheng said as he and the others took a step back. Feng Ling raised the sniper rifle in her hand and aimed at the target 100 meters ahead. With a pung sound, she fired and prepared to hit the bullseye. The other 4 knew that her strength was not limited to this. Even though she had not held a sniper rifle for a long time, she was definitely not out of practice. Then, Feng Ling turned the gun 45 degrees and fired at the target 300 meters away. Once again she hit the bullseye. At this moment applause rang out from all around. Then, everyone looked forward to her next move. Feng Ling aimed the gun at the center of the target, that was 500 meters away. I heard that when Feng Ling left the base, she could already hit the target 500 meters away. However, I heard that she only tried it a few times on her own, and never did it in front of us. Now that so long has passed, I wonder if she can still do it. She can definitely do it. Before their voices fell, another gunshot rang out in the air. Feng Ling still held the gun in her hand, and watched the bullet fly to a position 500 meters away in a short period of time. It suddenly passed through the center of the red circle. Not to mention the other 4 people. Even the drill master who saw Feng Ling came back and didn't intend to disturb them for the time being was surprised. He looked at the bullseye and then at Feng Ling, who was holding the sniper rifle calmly. He swallowed the tea in his mouth and then secretly thought in his heart, no wonder Feng Ling was invited back to the base as an intern drill master. For someone like her who hadn't touched a sniper rifle for 2 to 3 years, this kind of perfect accuracy. Even he might not be able to have this kind of calmness and confidence. No matter what Title 11 base gave her, she deserved it. Feng Ling put down the gun and looked back at them. You guys continue to practice. I won't disturb your training process. It's not a bother, it's not a bother. Originally, you should have a part in these training processes. But now that you are an instructor, you really can't train with us anymore, right? Lei Ping asked as he helped her pick up the gun. Feng Ling didn't explain but only said, I haven't eaten the food in the base's cafeteria for a long time. Let's go eat together tonight when we have time. Will you stay at the base today? Will you stay? When Tam heard this, he immediately leaned over excitedly. Where do you want to stay? The original residence or the new place for us brothers to live? No, you are a girl now. You can't live with us, right? The base should have specially arranged a separate residence for you because of your gender. Have you asked Ah Feng and arranged a place for you to live? There were so many questions, and Feng Ling couldn't answer them all. She looked at Tam and thought for a moment before saying, not yet. She didn't say that she would stay, but she didn't know when Li Nanheng would come back. Maybe he wouldn't come back tonight. She was already in 11 base now, and there was no need to go out and live outside. Right now, the most important thing to do was to wait for Li Nanheng to come back and quickly ask him to sign a permit for her so that she could go to High City smoothly. Now that she suddenly came back, I guess the base hasn't prepared anything immediately. Maybe she will go back to her previous place to live? They stood there and directly discussed. It can't be. It's no longer suitable for Feng Ling to live in the same building as anyone in the base. Why not? She used to live next door to Boss Li. Boss's room has never been changed, and her room is cleaned every day. It's always clean. She can just bring a new quilt in. Why is it so troublesome? And it's only natural for her to live next door to Boss, right? Kay listened and did not speak. He recalled the scene he saw about Feng Ling and Boss Li in the jungle, and then remembered that Feng Ling didn't seem to have any interaction with Boss Li in the past few months after returning to Los Angeles. He immediately turned his gaze to her face, as if trying to see what she was thinking. Chapter 1067. With the excuse that Ah Feng still had something to discuss with her, Feng Ling withdrew from the overly enthusiastic sniper team training camp. Otherwise, the 4 of them would have chatted with her for 3 days and 3 nights. Ah Feng was indeed looking for her. When Feng Ling returned to the base hall, Ah Feng asked her, I don't know if Boss Li can come back today. Do you want to stay in the base today? Recently, there are a lot of things going on in the Li family. We don't want to disturb Boss, so we didn't call him to ask when he would come back. Now that the old man is seriously ill, we can't rush him. Feng Ling said, Then I'll stay here first. Do you have to go? Since you're back to the base, I think you might as well take the employment letter and go to the shooting range to be a drill master. No, I'll just stay here and wait for Li Nanheng to come back to sign the contract. Seeing that Feng Ling didn't waver at all, Ah Feng didn't say more. All right, I'll ask someone to send you to your place. Feng Ling thought that they had arranged a single room for her, so she nodded and didn't say more. Ah Feng sent someone to take her to her place to rest, but when she walked from the base hall to the so-called residence, she felt that this road was very familiar. Until the building she used to live in appeared in front of her. Until that person brought her up to the floor she used to live in, and then brought her to the room she used to live in. When he went up to help her open the door, she looked at the bright room and the clean bed. She stood there for a long time without moving. Miss Feng, Ah Feng said that you can go back to live here first. There is no other place for you, so you can live here first. Feng Ling stood outside the door and turned to look at the door next door. The days when she lived next door with Li Nanheng were still vivid in her mind. The man in front of her was only sent by Ah Feng, so he didn't have much to say. Feng Ling didn't say much and walked in. The man left. After he left, Feng Ling stood in this familiar room and called Ah Feng. "Help me arrange another room to live in. I don't want to live here." "Why? Haven't you always lived there? It has always been very comfortable. I thought it would be more convenient for you to live there now." "There's no need. Doesn't 11 base also have special guest rooms? Just find me a normal guest room." Feng Ling held the phone and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. She opened the windows and looked out. It was all familiar. Guest room? Feng Ling's words were very clear. Although she was now in 11 base, she had no intention of coming back. "All right, come over later. I'll get you the key to the guest room. There are a few guest rooms upstairs in the base hall. You can stay there first." "Thanks." Feng Ling hung up. Before she left, she saw the balcony outside the window and walked out. At the same time, she turned to look at the neighboring balcony and the room on the balcony. He stood there silently for a while, then withdrew his gaze and walked back to the window. When he walked out of the door, he didn't say anything about the furnishings in the room that hadn't changed in the past 2 or 3 years. He just walked out. On the first night in the guest room of the base, Feng Ling couldn't sleep. When she woke up the next day, she went to the base cafeteria to eat. Several familiar brothers came to talk to her, but she just sat there listlessly and occasionally responded perfunctorily. Then the rumor that Feng Ling has now become a drill master and has become more arrogant spread throughout the base within a few hours. Those who liked her didn't take it seriously, and those who didn't like her criticized her behind her back. Feng Ling didn't bother to pay attention to them. After eating, she went back to sleep and didn't contact anyone. Even the 4 members of the sniper team came to visit her during the training break. She continued to sleep and closed the door. After waiting for 2 whole days, Li Nanheng didn't come back. Ah Feng said that he had called the Li family. Grandfather Li's condition was not very good. Li Nanheng was the only grandson of the Li family and couldn't leave at this time. This made Feng Ling suddenly have a feeling that waiting for Li Nanheng was going to take forever. But now her work at the Ted couple's home had ended. She still needed Li Nanheng's signature to go to High City as she promised Dr. Qin. She didn't take over the drill master's job at 11 base. It was really boring to stay in the guest room every day. On the 3rd day after returning to 11 base, Feng Ling finally couldn't stand it anymore. She followed the familiar gunshots and went to the sniper team. At first, she only sat with the drill master of the sniper team to drink tea and chat. Later, she directly trained with the other 4 members and regained some of the feeling in 11 base. On the evening of the 3rd day, Feng Ling trained with the other 4 members of the sniper team for a day. She was a little tired and was about to go back to rest when Ah Feng suddenly called her. "Feng Ling, Boss Li is back." Hearing this news, Feng Ling didn't even give herself time to go back to change and take a shower. She directly went to the base hall. However, when she arrived at the hall, she didn't see Li Nanheng. Grandfather Li's condition has temporarily stabilized. In the next 2 days, the military will come to the base to discuss in detail. Boss Li will only come back today, but he didn't come to the hall. He should have directly returned to his residence, or is inspecting another camp. I haven't called him yet. Feng Ling, are you in a hurry? Feng Ling. How could she not be in a hurry? She had been waiting here for 3 days. But even though she waited, she really realized that Li Nanheng had returned. She recalled that since they parted in the jungle in Boston, the number of times she met Li Nanheng could be counted with 3 fingers. However, in the past 9 months, even if they met, they would only brush past each other. She didn't speak, and he would also pass by indifferently. His completely unfamiliar attitude made it difficult for her to figure out what he was thinking. Mr. Mo wanted to choose a capable person from 11 base to be his bodyguard. Ah Feng knew this, so Li Nanheng must also know this. If she really didn't know how to ask Li Nanheng, should she just write a document first and then bring it to him for his signature? After returning to her room, Feng Ling turned on the laptop and wrote a document. Then she asked someone to print out 2 copies and went to Li Nanheng's residence with the documents. When she walked downstairs, she glanced up and saw that the light in Li Nanheng's room was on. She walked over quickly and approached with the documents that needed his signature. Before she went upstairs, she suddenly saw that the light in the room went out. Feng Ling paused and glanced at the time. It was only 9:30 in the evening. Was he asleep? Chapter 1068. Feng Ling stood downstairs of Li Nanheng's residence and looked at the window with the light turned off. She stood there for a long time to make sure that the light was not turned on again. After confirming that he was really asleep, she turned around with the documents in her hand. However, she still didn't believe that he could sleep so early. As she walked, she looked back. It was dark in the room. Was it because he didn't sleep well at home, because of Grandfather Li? Did he want to rest early after returning to the base today? It was so late. It didn't seem necessary for her to knock on his door now. Even if she got the signature now, she couldn't leave the base overnight. She had to wait until tomorrow morning. Besides, it was not easy to knock on his door. Every time she entered his room, she would suffer a lot before she could leave. Feng Ling didn't go, but went back to the guest room upstairs in the base hall. The next morning, she woke up very early and wanted to go to his place to wait for him. However, when she arrived, the 2 men passing by outside the door saw her and asked excitedly, "Feng Ling, are you here to look for boss?" So now everyone knew that Li Nanheng and she had feelings for each other. Feng Ling answered, "Yes, I have something to talk to him about." Boss woke up early. I saw him go to the base cafeteria half an hour ago. He didn't seem to eat anything last night. He should have gone to eat breakfast early today. There are people from the military coming over in the afternoon. Boss has been busy recently. I see. Thank you. Feng Ling nodded and turned to walk to the base canteen. It was only 6 o'clock in the morning. He went downstairs half an hour ago. Did he sleep early last night? Feng Ling was confused but didn't think much. She went to the canteen and thought that she could find him, but she looked around the canteen and didn't see Li Nanheng. "Did you see Boss Li?" After looking for a long time, Feng Ling stopped a man who had just finished eating and asked, "Boss Li, he just had breakfast here and left. Where did he go?" "I don't know. Unlike us, Boss Li can only go to the fixed training ground every day. Boss goes to Team 1, the sniper team, and Team 4 to see the newcomers. After a while, he has a meeting with Ah Feng and the others. He also has military affairs. I don't know where he is now." Feng Ling once again held the document in her hand and stood rooted to the ground. A moment later, she picked up her cell phone expressionlessly and called Li Nanheng. The phone was turned off. Very good. Was he really so busy that he couldn't see his tail? Or was he deliberately ignoring her and not seeing her? But thinking about it carefully, he hadn't looked for her in the past 9 months. How could he have deliberately left her hanging? 11 base was not small. Not every member could easily meet someone of Li Nanheng's status. She used to see him often, but that was because he wanted her to. It wasn't that Feng Ling didn't know this. But she wasn't looking for him right now. She just wanted his signature. Looking at the people in the cafeteria who were looking at her curiously, Feng Ling turned around and walked out with a dark expression. 11 base was so big. She was likely to go to Team 1, but he was in another team. She went to another team, but he went to another team. She couldn't find him at all. She simply went to a certain road in the base and found a stone puppet to sit on. She swore that as long as Li Nanheng signed the document to let her go to High City, she would immediately leave 11 base and never look for him again. Absolutely yes, no, she would. Then Feng Ling sat on the stone puppet on this road for 2 hours, but Li Nanheng still didn't pass by. She called him again, but his phone was still turned off. Feng Ling sat there, holding the document in her hand. Her patience was almost exhausted, and she thought hopelessly she'd better go to his place. He had something to discuss with the people from the military in the afternoon. The weather was so hot. A person like him who was obsessed with cleanliness should come back to take a shower and change his clothes after finishing his work in the morning. In fact, The news that Feng Ling had returned to the base had long been spread in the base. Even if Li Nanheng was not in the base 2 days ago, his subordinates were all well informed and observant. How could they not know that someone was waiting for him in the base? Li Nanheng came back from Team 4 and went directly to the base hall. Feng was having a meeting with several other people in the hall. Seeing Boss come, he stood up. Boss. Xiao Su also came in to submit something at this time. Seeing Li Nanheng come in, he suddenly asked suspiciously, Feng Ling has been looking for you. Have you seen her? Li Nanheng picked up the teacup and took a sip, saying lightly, looking for me? Seeing his expression as if he didn't know, Xiao Su coughed. It seems that she hasn't seen you yet. Li Nanheng didn't answer, nor did he respond to this matter. He went straight to business with Feng, but Xiao Su didn't give up. As soon as they were idle, he interrupted and finally told them that Feng Ling wanted to go to High City to be Mrs. Mo's bodyguard and wanted Boss's signature to let her go. Then he just stood there, waiting to see Boss's expression. Boss, did Mr. Mo inform you that Feng Ling is going to High City? Have you received the news? Feng asked. Boss, did Mr. Mo inform you that Feng Ling is going to High City? Li Nanheng didn't take this topic seriously and didn't say anything. Since he came back from Boston with serious injuries, Li Nanheng had never mentioned Feng Ling's name or asked anything about her. Now he also didn't mention anything about her. If you really don't want to care about Feng Ling anymore, boss, can you give me a temporary privilege? I'll sign for her and let her go wherever she wants. Feng said again. Li Nanheng glanced at him coldly. Do you have nothing better to do? Why do I have nothing better to do? Do you dare to say that you're not giving her the cold shoulder? After all, she was so embarrassed when she left. Now that she can stand in the base again, you still let her wait for you in the base for several days. Tell me, you've been helping her prepare for a rainy day. Now that she has returned to the base, why don't you hurry to let her stay? Why don't you see her or sign for her to let her go? What are you planning? Feng couldn't hold back anymore. Li Nanheng's face was cold and calm. It has nothing to do with me, whether she returns to the base or not. When did I help her prepare for a rainy day? Xiao Su couldn't help glancing at him. Then after she was forcibly taken away from Boston, the Ted couple took her away so smoothly, and now the letter of appointment to the base has been issued so smoothly. She has regained all her face. Does it have nothing to do with you, boss? Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1069. That's her own business. Do you think she will be useful, just because I asked Mr. Ted to hire her as a bodyguard, and let her go to the city hall? Li Nanheng said coldly. Feng chuckled. Others might not understand this, but we can. You knew that Mr. Ted's family was grateful to Feng Ling for saving them. So you used this incident as bait, and successfully lured Feng Ling back to Los Angeles from Boston. It seemed like nothing happened, but in fact your plan was very shrewd. You helped her pave the way back to the base with the help of Mr. and Mrs. Ted. When the election time came, you could bring her back to the base. That's right, boss. You're obviously still thinking about her in your heart. Why do you have to be so cold as if nothing has happened? You think too much. Li Nanheng stood there calmly and glanced at Feng. Don't mention this name in front of me again. If you talk to me again, I'll tell the Li family that you're neglecting your duty here, and kick you back to the Li family. Feng was about to curse, but before he could say anything, he saw Li Nanheng's back. He was clearly the one who had already paved the way for Feng Ling, but now he turned around and refused to admit it. How King annoying. Li Nanheng walked quickly out of the base hall. Under the hot morning sun, his face was as cold as frost. He walked back with only one thought in his mind. When Feng Ling left the base, she had to take back what she had lost by herself. She did it. She had a proud personality and was extremely strong. If someone hurt her once, it would be useless even if that person paid back 1,000 times more. If she wanted to deny something, it would be equivalent to it not existing. She only wanted to rely on herself, and didn't want to ask for help from anyone. She didn't even want to come back to 11 base. She could clearly use the road he had paved for her, But until now, she still refused. She was really stubborn and stupid, Li Nanheng sneered. But then he smiled self-deprecatingly. No. In fact, there was someone more stubborn and stupid than her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have fallen head first into her pit, and couldn't climb up even after his head was broken and bleeding. Feng Ling waited outside his room for a long time. She didn't know when he would come back. She wanted to go to the room she used to stay in, but found that the door was locked. It seemed like the door was locked when she came that day. Unless she agreed to move in, the door would always be locked, and no one else could enter. There was no place to sit in the corridor. She had been standing for a long time. Even if she had enough stamina, it wasn't enough to keep standing. She squatted by the wall for a while until her legs were numb. Just as she was about to stand up, she suddenly heard footsteps coming from the corridor. She turned to look in the direction of the staircase. In the next second, her legs gave way and she almost knelt down. The light in the corridor was a little dim, but it was still spacious. Li Nanheng stood there, looking at her coldly. The moment Feng Ling met his gaze, she raised her hand to support herself against the wall. She secretly cursed herself for squatting earlier. Her legs were numb, and she could not stand steadily for a moment. This posture was somewhat awkward. When she looked at him again, she felt as if she could be frozen into an ice cube under his gaze. The man who had almost died with her in the Boston jungle 9 months ago was standing there, looking at her expressionlessly and indifferently. It was not until the moment they finally met that Feng Ling realized that she and Li Nanheng had brushed past each other in the past 9 months. But basically, they had never seen each other before. Even when their eyes met, they were very strange and alienated. In her mind, when Li Nanheng wanted to bully her, he would just drag her out in the middle of the night, impose devil training on her, exhaust her strength, watch her lie on the ground exhausted, and then wait for her to beg for mercy. Or perhaps it was his honesty, his coldness and ruthlessness to others, his high spirits, and his patience with her. At that time, he only had eyes for her. As long as she passed by, his eyes would follow her. However, at this moment, the expressionless man standing at the top of the stairs was wearing a black combat uniform. He had neat short hair and handsome facial features. It was as if he was still the same person as before, but at the same time, he seemed to be different. His hair used to be very short, but now it seemed to be much shorter and neat, compared to 9 months ago, when he looked too thin and haggard when he was seriously injured. Now he looked the same as before. He just stood there straight, and looked like he was hiding a hidden sense of strength. His temperament seemed to be different. It could not be said that it was temperament. It could only be said that when he stood in front of her, his gaze and the attitude he exuded were indifferent and distant. He stood there expressionlessly, his eyes meeting hers in midair. There was no sadness or joy, as if he was looking at a stranger. This kind of gaze reminded Feng Ling of the dinner party she attended with the Ted couple a few months ago. At that time, his eyes were also like this, but there was no emotion in his eyes. They were so cold that she wondered if there would be a second person in this world who looked exactly like him. Otherwise, how could he be so cold? Now seeing him standing here, the numbness in Feng Ling's legs disappeared, and she stood up straight. Thousands of thoughts flashed through her mind, but it only took a few seconds. She looked at him and said directly, "I heard that Mr. Mo is going to choose a capable person from 11 base to go to High City to protect Mrs. Mo's safety. After all, Mrs. Mo is a woman. It will be more convenient to have a female bodyguard by her side." "I plan to go to High City to take over this bodyguard job. Give me your signature." After speaking, Feng Ling retracted her gaze, tried to calm down, and continued to stand there. "As long as you give me your signature, I can leave immediately." Li Nanheng looked at her indifferently, and then moved his gaze away from her. He walked straight over, but did not stand in front of her. Instead, he brushed past her, came to the door of his room, opened the door, and entered without looking back. Then he closed the door without saying a word. Feng Ling stood outside the door and stared blankly for more than 10 seconds. Her heart skipped a beat, and the calmness that she had just maintained on her face collapsed in an instant. Remember what you said today. The words that the man said hoarsely in her ear, before he was seriously injured and fainted, echoed in her ears again. It was a brief brush with each other, as if they were strangers, separating the past from the present, forming a boundary between the past and the present. Please remember this book's domain name. For mobile version website. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.